Chapter 803. A charming widow living alone with a ridiculously beautiful daughter. Tsk. I wonder how many men would be jealous. Although Song Qinshu had never seen her mother, with Gubai as a comparison, since she was known as the #1 beauty of the Jin kingdom in the past, she must be a beauty that could bring disaster to the country and its people. I've actually wanted to visit Auntie for a long time, but I never had the chance. Today, I happened to run into Brother Wei Wang, so I came along. Zhong Jie smiled sweetly, but her eyes glanced at Song Qinshu intentionally or unintentionally. Song Qinshu couldn't help but feel strange. Why did this girl keep staring at him? When he thought of that strange feeling of déjà vu, he became even more puzzled. Gubai pulled Zhong Jie to sit down. Hearing her say this, she casually asked, "Zhong Jie, do you know why Prince of Wei is here?" She couldn't help but be curious. After all, Wei Wang rarely came to her place these past few years. This time, he must have come for a reason. "Zhong Jie, I don't dare." The girl looked at her hesitantly. Gubai was slightly startled. "We're all family, why wouldn't I dare? I'm afraid that Auntie will be unhappy if I come out." The girl's big eyes blinked, like a delicate porcelain doll sitting there. However, Song Qinshu keenly noticed a trace of slyness in the depths of her eyes. "All right, Auntie promises that she won't be unhappy." Gubai's interest was indeed aroused. "Actually, it's like this." The girl paused and looked at Song Qinshu before continuing. "Brother Wei Wang can't bear to see Auntie being deceived by a bad man, so he decided to come and warn Auntie." Song Qinshu was puzzled by her gaze. "Why are you looking at me?" "Because the bad man is Uncle Tangquo." The girl's smile was sweet and clear, but her words almost angered Song Qinshu to death. "Uncle Tangquo, how did it feel to be the top courtesan of Chiu Xiang brothel yesterday?" Song Qinshu's face heated up. "What does a girl like you know about taste?" "The courtesan of Autumn Fragrance brothel." Gubai looked at Zhong Jie blankly. "Looks like Uncle Tangquo didn't talk to Auntie," the young girl said as if inadvertently. "It's like this." She then told her about how a group of men spent a lot of money to fight for the title of courtesan belle in Autumn Fragrance brothel last night, and how Tangquo won the beauty. Song Qinshu's face was very dark. This young girl looked innocent and romantic on the surface, but she was intentionally or unintentionally sowing discord between them. Wei Wang had clearly left, but she had repeated what Wei Wang wanted to do. From his point of view, Wei Wang might have come here because of this young girl. Song Qinshu was still thinking about how to explain it to Gubai. After all, he only came back last night when it was almost dawn. After being deliberately provoked by Zhong Jie, it would be strange if Gubai wasn't angry. However, Gubai's following reaction almost made his eyeballs pop out. Her expression was normal as she smiled faintly. "It's normal for a man to go out and have fun occasionally. Wei Wang is really making a big deal out of it." Song Qinshu didn't know what to do. With a wife like this, did Tangquo save the earth in his past life? The young girl was also stunned. The scene she had imagined didn't happen. She didn't expect Gubai to be so calm. However, she reacted quickly and immediately said, "That's right. In my opinion, Brother Wei Wang might not really have any sense of justice. I'm afraid it's more because Uncle Tangquo snatched the title of courtesan of Autumn Fragrance brothel from him last night. That's why he came here early in the morning to cause trouble." Gubai smiled gently, revealing a row of white teeth. She didn't continue the conversation. Instead, she sighed softly. "I pity that courtesan of Autumn Fragrance brothel. She used to be a high and mighty princess, but now she has become a commodity for men to pick and choose from." Sigh, Song Qinshu didn't expect Gubai to have such a kind heart. For a moment, his heart was filled with emotions, and he didn't know what to say. The young girl, however, didn't think much of it. "Those Song people are useless. What's there to be pitted about?" Gubai shook her head slightly. Otherwise, when the Song Kingdom was weak and the Jin Kingdom was strong, the Song Kingdom's princess became a captive. If the Jin Kingdom is weak in the future and the Daxing Constabulary is conquered by a strong enemy, how can our fates be any better than hers? The weak are prey to the strong. That's the truth of the world. The young girl said expressionlessly. However, Gubai's words had touched a sore spot in her heart, and she suddenly fell silent. Seeing the two women's dejected expressions, Song Qingshu laughed. Don't worry. There are still men like us to protect the country. Gubai looked at him tenderly with a smile on her face. The young girl replied coldly, those Song women were also sold by their men. Song Qingshu choked. Why was this young girl always making things difficult for him? Had Tang Quobian offended her in some way? The young girl also realized that she had lost her composure. Embarrassed to stay any longer, she stood up and bid farewell to the two men. Before she left, she suddenly asked, by the way, tonight is Chiu Chao's coming-of-age ceremony. Anton, Uncle Tang Qua, are you going? Chiu Chao? Coming-of-age ceremony? Song Qingshu was confused. He had no idea who Chiu Chao was. Gubai nodded and smiled. It's the coming-of-age ceremony of the eldest sister of the Pucha family. Of course, the Tangqua family will be there. After receiving confirmation from Song Qingshu, the young girl suddenly became happy and skipped away. Seeing the confusion on Song Qingshu's face, Gubai explained, during this period of time, you've been elusive, so I've received the invitation from the Pucha clan on your behalf. Today is Chiu Chao's 14th birthday, and our three great clans have always been close, so of course we have to go and support her. I've already prepared the gift, so you don't have to worry, husband. Is Chiu Chao Pucha Ahut or Pucha Ahuti's daughter? Song Qingshu asked directly. After all, Chiu Chao was still young, so it was normal that Tang Quobian didn't know her. Pucha Ahut and Ahuti were now the masters of the Pucha family. One of them was the left deputy prefect, while the other was the right deputy prefect. It could be said that they controlled the imperial army of the imperial city. Look at your memory. Chiu Chao is Pucha Ahut's daughter. Gubai rolled her eyes at her husband. At this time, in the Pucha family's mansion, a delicate young girl was smashing vase after vase at a middle-aged man. I don't want to marry that cripple Yang. I, Pucha Chiu Chao, am in love with the most valiant warrior in the entire Jin kingdom. I won't even look at that cripple. Don't smash it, don't smash it. That vase was a gift from father's friend in the Qin kingdom. It's very precious. Looking at the shattered vases on the floor, the middle-aged man looked distressed. This isn't a matter of whether you want to marry him or not. You were betrothed before you were born. Chapter 804. Whoever arranged the marriage, go and marry yourself, I don't care. The young girl became even more furious when she heard her father's words, and angrily threw the porcelain bottle in her hand. The middle-aged man's heart tightened, and with a leap, he caught Jing Tailon, who was about to hit the ground, and let out a long sigh of relief. Thank goodness. Seeing this, the young girl stamped her feet and ran over to grab another painting, wanting to tear it apart. The middle-aged man shouted, Don't, let's talk it out. That's Northern Song's Fan Quan's snowy forest. It wasn't easy for Daddy to get it back from someone. At the same time, he was filled with regret. What was wrong with my brain just now? Why did I meet this girl in the study? Fine, take a look first. If I'm not satisfied, I'll tear this painting right away. Do you believe me? The young girl angrily pretended to tear it apart. This pair of father and daughter were naturally Pucha At and Pucha Chuta. Seeing his daughter's actions, Pucha At broke out in a cold sweat and hurriedly said, F***CK, you know Daddy is a man of his word. Now that the king of Zhao has passed away and Wan Yenkong has died in a foreign land, the king of Zhao's faction has declined. If I were to cancel the engagement now, what would outsiders think of us? They would think that the Pucha family are all snobs, trying to claim marriage when the king of Zhao's faction was at its peak. Now that they have declined, if we were to cancel the engagement, we would be criticized by others. Pucha Chiozao looked hesitant, but quickly raised her head and said, I don't care, this is your problem, I won't marry a cripple. Pucha hurriedly waved his hands. F***ck, listen to me, I've seen that Yangguo before. Although he's missing an arm, he's definitely a handsome man, and his martial arts are very high. I heard that he's famous in the Central Plains. No matter how handsome he is, he's still a cripple. If his martial arts were really that high, he wouldn't have had an arm chopped off. The young girl couldn't help but snort. I heard that there's another reason why he lost an arm, but I'm not too sure about the specifics. Pucha furrowed his brows and fell into deep thought. If you still can't find a reason to submit to me, I'm going to start tearing it. Pucha Autumn Grass picked up the scroll again and pretended to tear it apart. Wait! An idea flashed through Pucha's mind, and he hurriedly said, How about this? Today is your coming-of-age banquet, and Daddy has invited all the reputable people in the capital. Yangguo will be here tonight as well. How about this, when the time comes you can sneak a peek at him. If you really aren't satisfied, Daddy will throw away this old face and help you break off the engagement. What do you say? That's more like it. The girl snorted and finally put down Fan Quan's famous painting in her hand. She thought to herself, when the time comes, even if the man surnamed Yang is earth-shattering handsome, my father and I will not be satisfied. I don't believe that a man with a broken arm really has the charm to make me fall in love with him at first sight. Of course, Song Qinshu did not know that a girl was raising flags for herself. At this moment, he was looking at his nominal wife with a smile on his face, causing Gobai to pout coquettishly. Why are you looking at me like that? I'm curious about what you said just now. Are you really not angry? Song Qinshu chuckled. Of course I'm angry. Gobai deliberately put on an angry look, but she quickly giggled, revealing her pearly white teeth. But even though I'm angry, I'm not stupid. That girl Zhongjie clearly wants to use me as a weapon, so why would I jump into the trap she has set for me? A strange look appeared on Song Qinshu's face. I didn't expect Madam to be so intelligent. Are you beating around the bush and calling me stupid? Gobai bit her lip and glared at him fiercely. Of course not, it's a sincere compliment. Song Qinshu laughed. You pass. Gobai's eyebrows suddenly furrowed. But why does that girl Zhongjie specifically target you? Did you offend her at some point? Song Qinshu looked gloomy. I was also wondering. I've never seen her before. He knew that it was bad when he blurted it out. Fortunately, Gobai was thinking about the problem and did not hear any flaws. Did you bully her mother? Gobai suddenly looked at Song Qinshu suspiciously. She is an orphan and a widowed mother. She has suffered a lot over the years. She heard a lot of dirty men have ideas about her mother. This girl hates this kind of thing the most. How is that possible? Song Qinshu was speechless. He did not expect Gobai's imagination to be so strange. He had only heard about Zhongjie's mother, but he had never seen her. It's really not possible. Gobai was just joking. She trusted her husband quite a lot in this regard. Forget it, let's not think about it. Maybe it's just that Zhongjie is in a bad mood today. Song Qinshu nodded, but Zhongjie's lively eyes kept appearing in his mind. He had definitely seen this eyes somewhere before, but where? Right, I almost forgot to ask about that Huakue. Is she very beautiful? Gobai suddenly looked at him with a faint smile. She is indeed very beautiful. Noticing Gobai's expression change slightly, Song Qinshu hurriedly added, but she is still far from Madam. You only know how to make me happy. Gobai knew that her husband was saying nice things, but she still could not help but be very happy. What's more, an assassin came and saved that Huakue. Nothing happened between me and her. Song Qinshu secretly added in his heart. Although nothing happened between him and her, a lot of things happened with the Empress. Then are you injured? Hearing that they had met an assassin, Gubai's expression finally changed. She hurriedly pulled him over and looked him up and down. I'm not injured. Didn't you personally experience it last night? Song Qinshu suddenly said with an ambiguous expression. Ah, Gubai cried out in surprise. Her cheeks suddenly became as red as peach blossoms. Last night, he was as strong as a bull and tirelessly plowed the fields. He did not look injured at all. As the two of them were flirting, a servant suddenly came to report that the Prince of Hailing, Wanyan Liang's messenger, was requesting an audience. Why is he looking for you? For some reason, Gubai subconsciously disliked Wanyan Liang. I don't know. Song Qinshu shook his head and asked the servant to let the messenger in. Only then did he know that Wanyan Liang had invited him to the Fu to talk to him because of what happened last night. Wanyan Liang can't possibly still remember the promise to let me pick any of the concubines in the Fu, right? Song Qinshu immediately had a strange expression on his face. Of course, he knew that the other person's goal was Gubai. But right now, he was in the dark while the other person was in the light. He had absolute confidence that he would make the other person go for wool and come home shorn. I'll go with you. Just as Song Qinshu was deep in thought, Gubai suddenly spoke. Chapter 805. What are you going to do? Song Qinshu frowned. He wasn't worried that Gubai would ruin his plans, but he didn't want Gubai to come into contact with Wanyan Liang. That perverted devil was famous in history, and he obviously had improper thoughts about Gubai. Although Song Qinshu was confident that he could protect Gubai, it was still a man's instinct to not let his woman face any danger. After all, he saved my husband's life during our trip to Kaifeng. We had planned to pay him a visit when you got better, but unfortunately, we had a conflict and the matter was left unsettled. Now it's time to pay him a visit. Otherwise it would be too rude, Gubai replied gently. Although she didn't like Wanyan Liang, she cared more about the reputation of the aristocratic family. Her husband's career had not been smooth these years, and because of her, he had offended too many people. Now there was no need to offend the King of Hailing. If she could take the opportunity to build a good relationship with him, it might help her husband's future career. Gubai's words were reasonable, so Song Qinshu had no reason to refuse. In addition, he didn't want to find all kinds of reasons to reject her generosity when they arrived at the king's mansion. After taking Gubai with him, Wanyan Liang wouldn't give him another woman, right? Song Qinshu was not a saint. If Wanyan Liang had bad intentions, he didn't mind letting him go for wool and come home shorn. If it was any other time, he would have accepted it. But if he fought 2 battles in a row last night, and then went to the king's mansion to fool around, even an iron rod would be ground into a needle. The two discussed what they needed to pay attention to later, and then set off for the king's mansion with the gifts. The mansions of the Jin kingdom's high officials and nobles were all concentrated in a certain area. Although the Tanqua mansion was a few streets away from the king's mansion, that was because the houses were too densely distributed. When they were about to reach the Prince of Hailing's palace, they saw Wanyan Liang waiting at the gate through the carriage window. Song Qinshu looked into the distance and saw an elegant young woman standing next to him. Judging from her clothes, she should be the Prince of Hailing's concubine, Dan Jing. Song Qinshu had heard Mrs. Tang talk about this Princess Hailing before. She said that she and Wanyan Liang colluded to trap Mrs. Tang. He had thought that this Princess Hailing should be the kind of person who was scheming and had high cheekbones. But now that he saw that she had such a simple and elegant temperament, he couldn't help but feel strange. You can't judge a book by its cover. Women with a heart as vicious as a scorpion often have a harmless appearance. Song Qinshu secretly warned himself not to be fooled by this woman's elegant appearance. In the past, Song Qinshu found it strange that Mrs. Tang, who came from the Tanqua family, one of the 3 great aristocratic families of the Jin kingdom, could only endure being bullied by Wan Yen Liang. But after spending some time in the capital, he finally understood the mystery. Although the Tangqua family was still one of the three great aristocratic families in name, it had long been declining. One of the main reasons was that Tangqua Bian, the head of the family, had married Song Bai, the most beautiful woman in the Jin kingdom. This had aroused the anger of all the men in the aristocratic circle. Intentionally or unintentionally, they excluded him. Tangqua Bian was not the kind of person who was good at currying favor, so his career had not improved. Because of him, the other branches of the Tangqua family were also struggling in the officialdom. Because of this, the other branches of the Tangqua family were also quite dissatisfied with Tangqua Bian as the head of the family. Although the Tangqua family had not completely fallen apart, there were still undercurrents of discord. With her family in such a situation, it was no wonder that Mrs. Tang was isolated and helpless. When Tangqua Bian went south to Kaifeng, Wan Yanping had used her connections to give him a chance to gain merit for his future promotion. Who would have thought that he would die in a foreign land? As Song Qingshu was sighing, he smelled an elegant fragrance. Song Bai's soft body leaned towards him and said, "My husband, the Prince of Hailing, is now far more powerful than us, but he is acting so friendly. The Han people have a saying, those who are unaccountably solicitous are hiding evil intentions. My husband, you must be careful." "Yes, I will be careful." Song Qingshu sighed inwardly. Tangqua Bian's beautiful wife was really smart. In fact, he knew very well why Wan Yanliang was so friendly towards him. He was afraid that Song Bai was behind all this, but there was no need to tell Song Bai about this, lest she become more annoyed. "What a rare guest! Princess, Brother Tangqua, I have been waiting for you for a long time." After the two of them got off the carriage, Wan Yen Liang greeted them warmly. "Greetings, Brother Hailing, Sister Wang." Song Bai smiled sweetly, lifted her skirt and bowed. Get up, get up. We are family, there is no need to be so polite." Wan Yen Liang hurriedly stretched out his hand to help her up, but Song Bai was one step ahead of him and straightened up, causing his hands to miss. Wan Yen Liang's expression didn't change, and he naturally put his hands down. There was not a trace of intention, but Song Qingshu looked on coldly and knew what he was thinking. "Brother Wang saved our family's Wogu La's life in Kaifeng City. We, husband and wife, should have come to thank you for saving our life, but Wogu La has yet to recover from his heavy injuries. We hope that Brother Wang will forgive us." Song Bai gave a look, and a servant brought over a gift that had been prepared. In order to show their sincerity, she didn't ask for the help of the servant. Instead, she and Song Qingshu personally brought the gift to Wan Yanliang and his wife. "Song Bai, you are too polite. We are family, and Tangqua Bian is my brother-in-law. How can I not give him a gift?" Wan Yanliang said with a smile as he reached out to take the gift from her. Song Bai was slightly surprised. According to etiquette, Princess Hailing should be the one to take the gift from her. If he took it directly, it would be inappropriate for a man and a woman to touch each other. However, the two of them were close, so it was not wrong for him to take it. Song Qingshu frowned and was about to help Song Bai out, but he found that after Song Bai handed the gift to Wan Yanliang, she withdrew her snow-white hands skillfully. She didn't give Wan Yanliang any chance to take advantage of her. Song Qingshu quickly reacted. As the most beautiful woman in the Jin kingdom, Gu Bai must have had many lascivious men around her in her early years. She was very good at dealing with these methods of taking advantage of others, which was why Wan Yanliang, who was an experienced driver, had been defeated several times. However, Gu Bai was smart. She didn't get taken advantage of, but she had to get back at him. Song Qingshu had an idea and imitated her. He gave the gift in his hand to Princess Hailing and said, "This is a small token of my appreciation. I hope Princess will not refuse it." His fingers almost touched her chest. Princess Hailing subconsciously took half a step back. She looked at Song Qingshu and saw that his eyes were clear. It didn't seem like he was doing it on purpose, so she didn't take it too seriously. A faint smile flashed across her fair and beautiful face. "Husband, you are too polite." Chapter 806. Tu Danjing did not expect that the other party would flirt with her in front of her husband. Just as she was about to reprimand him, a hot stream of air suddenly came from her fingertip. That stream of air was very strange. As soon as her fingertips felt it, it instantly disappeared into her limbs and bones. At that moment, she almost moaned in comfort. Fortunately, her good upbringing as a princess made her purse her lips in time. However, the strange feeling in her body became stronger and stronger. It was as if her whole body was soaked in hot water, and there was a pair of invisible hands caressing her body. Soon, she shyly noticed that the saliva between her legs was wet and sticky. Her usually delicate face blushed, as if she had applied a layer of powder. "I'm really sorry. I accidentally touched Princess." Song Qing lowered his voice and said quickly. At the same time, he calmly withdrew his hand. "No. It's okay." When Song Qing's hand left her hand, Tu Danjing even felt a faint sense of loss, but she quickly recovered and carefully looked at Song Qing's eyes. She couldn't see any awkwardness or nastiness in them at all. She couldn't help but wonder, did he really accidentally touch me? Recalling the feeling of the heavenly thunder and fire, Tu Danjing's heart palpitated. Could it be that what those people said was true? It turned out that in the circle of the noblewomen in the capital, this group of princesses often chatted in private. Occasionally, they would talk about the pleasures of the bedroom. Someone once said that if they met their destined person, as long as they touched skin to skin, every inch of the woman's skin would emit a call from the soul, longing to be in the other party's embrace. Could it be that this Tang Quobian is my destined man? Tu Danjing was in a trance. Her husband, Wan Yenliang, had never given her such a feeling. "Look at my memory. Why are you still standing at the door? Please come in. I have already prepared a banquet." Wan Yenliang's voice finally woke Tu Danjing from her trance. Tu Danjing, how can a dignified princess like you have such a ridiculous idea?" A trace of anger flashed across Tu Danjing's face. She turned and walked into the residence. In the end, she did not know whether Song Qing did it intentionally or not, but he stepped forward and blocked her path. She could not stop in time, and her whole body fell into his arms. Her full breasts pressed against Song Qing's arm, outlining a very attractive curve. Song Qing discreetly took a step back and respectfully bowed. "Princess, please." Because Song Qing had deliberately used his body to block Wan Yenliang's line of sight, he didn't see what had happened. When he heard movement over here, he subconsciously turned around and asked, what happened?" Tu Danjing raised her head and stared at the man in front of her. If he said that he did not do it on purpose, even a 3-year-old child would not believe it. However, when she thought of that heart-palpitating feeling just now, she did not know why she did not tell her husband the truth. She subconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear and calmly replied, "Nothing." Then, she quickly walked to her husband's side, as if she would be in danger if she stayed any longer. Looking at Tu Danjing's somewhat flustered figure, a faint smile appeared on Song Qing's lip. When he recalled the amazing elasticity that came from his arm, he could not help but be amazed. Her body is so delicate, but her breasts are so full. This is the best. Just now, when he was giving her gifts, he touched her fingers and took the opportunity to inject the joyful true qi that he had cultivated for a long time into her body. The joyful Zen technique was a dual cultivation technique. The true qi that was cultivated naturally had a strong effect of stimulating lust. Usually, Song Qing took pity on his own women and rarely used it on them. However, for Wan Yenliang's woman, he was not so polite. Just now it was just a small test. Song Qing had only used a small amount of joyful true qi. If he really had no scruples, he could have made Tu Danjing go limp on the spot. He understood that going too far was as bad as not going far enough. Thus, he only left a seed in her heart, waiting for it to sprout in the future and completely arouse the lust in her body. Because of the small incident at the gate, Tu Danjing had been distracted. Wan Yenliang could see that his wife was behaving strangely. In addition, he had something to discuss with Tang Kuo in private, so they quickly ended the banquet. Then, Wan Yenliang asked his wife to take Gubai for a walk in the garden of the mansion. Song Qing was originally a little worried. After all, Wan Yenliang's reputation was well known. Who knew what kind of tricks he would play? However, seeing that the garden was within sight, even if something happened, he would be able to save her in time. He secretly gave Gubai a warning look and let the two women wander around. There was a large man-made lake in the Prince of Hailing's mansion. The entire garden was built around this lake. Song Qing followed Wan Yenliang to a pavilion on a bridge in the middle of the lake and sat down. Looking down at the waterside pavilions in the garden, a look of surprise appeared on his face. Noticing his expression, Wan Yenliang smiled and said, "Brother Tang Kuo, what do you think of my garden? In the bitter cold of the north, it has created the charm of Jiangnan. It is simply uncanny workmanship." Song Qing sighed sincerely. Wan Yenliang sighed and said, "No matter how uncanny the workmanship is, it can't compare to the scenery of Jiangnan. Brother Tang Kuo, do you know what my greatest wish is?" Song Qing had a strange expression on his face. Of course, he knew Wan Yenliang's wish. The three greatest wishes of the most licentious emperor in history were all too famous. First, he wanted to be the commander of the army and punish the emperor. Second, he wanted to be the wife of the most beautiful woman in the world. Third, he wanted to be the wife of the most beautiful woman in the world. This was the wish of every man. If it weren't for the fact that the two of them had different goals, Song Qing would have grabbed Wan Yenliang's hand excitedly and shouted, "My soulmate!" Of course, Song Qing couldn't say Wan Yenliang's heroic words now. He looked around and saw a poem inscribed on the pillar of the pavilion. Suddenly, he had an idea. When the chariots are mixed together, how can there be other territories in Jiangnan? Raising troops on the West Lake, riding horses on the first peak of Mount Wu. What a good poem! Your Highness's greatest wish is to lead troops to conquer the southern Song dynasty? The first sentence of the poem, "When the chariots are mixed together," came from Qin Shi Huang's words after he unified the 6 states. But what kind of person was Qin Shi Huang? Just from this sentence, Song Qing could see that Wan Yenliang was not a loyal subject. However, it wouldn't do Song Qing any good to reveal this, so he pretended not to understand the hidden meaning of the poem. Brother Tang Kuo is indeed my soulmate. My greatest wish is to follow in the footsteps of the martyrs and conquer the land of the Song dynasty. Wan Yenliang was secretly shocked. When he saw that Song Qing didn't see anything wrong with the poem, he let out a sigh of relief. He was too careless. After he left, he had to find someone to scrape off this poem. Otherwise, it would bring him trouble sooner or later. Unwilling to continue on this topic, Wan Yenliang suddenly had an idea. He smiled at Song Qing and said, "Brother Tang Kuo, do you still remember my promise last time? Today, I've walked around the prince's mansion. If there's anyone you like, just tell me." Chapter 807. The smile on Wan Yenliang's face froze. He had planned to give Tang Kuobian 1 or 2 concubines so that Tang Kuobian would owe him a favor. In the future, he would have a chance to drive a wedge between Tang Kuobian and Tang Kuobian. Who knew that Tang Kuobian would choose Tu Danjing? There were many concubines in the Prince Hailing Palace, so Wan Yenliang wouldn't feel any heartache if he were to sacrifice 1 or 2. But Tu Danjing was different. Not to mention that Tu Danjing had the support of the Tu Danjing family. Even if she didn't, she was still his wife. Although he was a womanizer, he still liked this elegant and quiet wife of his. How could he give her away? Since Tang Quobian doesn't know what's good for him, don't blame me for being cruel. A murderous look flashed in Wan Yanliang's eyes. But at this time, Song Qingshu smiled and said, although there is no lack of beautiful women in the prince's palace, in front of the princess' unique and elegant temperament, all of them are too gaudy. To have such a good wife, your highness is truly fortunate. Seeing that Tang Quobian didn't mention anything about sleeping with Wan Yanliang couldn't help but frown. He didn't know what Tang Quobian meant, so he answered, Brother Tang Qua, you are deliberately showing off. You married the most beautiful woman in the Jin Kingdom. Many men in the capital are envious of you. Song Qingshu suddenly looked at him thoughtfully and said, I wonder if your highness is one of them? Wan Yanliang's smile froze. Fortunately, he was quick-witted and quickly came back to his senses. He said, I am also a man. Of course I am envious. But Gubai is my sister. Otherwise, I would have competed with Brother Tangqua. Your Highness, you must be joking. The Jin Kingdom doesn't have as many rules as the Song Kingdom. As long as they are not biological siblings, it doesn't matter. Wan Yanliang was stunned. Song Qingshu changed the topic. Your Highness, you invited us here today. I don't think it's just a simple banquet. Wan Yanliang was surprised. What did Tang Quobian mean? Why did he imply that it didn't matter if they were not biological siblings? Could it be? Thinking of Tang Quobian's undisguised praise and affection for Tu Danjing, Wan Yanliang's heart suddenly beat wildly. Could it be that he wanted to exchange their wives for fun? This kind of drama was widely spread among the nobles in the capital, but it was not something that could be shown in public. Wan Yanliang had also heard of it, but with his status, he had many ways to play with other people's wives. Why would he need to sacrifice his own wife? But it was different this time. Gubai was the emperor's younger sister, and there were many methods that could not be used on her in the past. Moreover, Gubai was the most beautiful woman in the Jin Kingdom. As long as he could get her, it was not unacceptable to pay a small price. Wan Yanliang raised his head and looked at the two girls in the garden. He did not know what Gubai and Tu Danjing were talking about, but all of a sudden, they started laughing hysterically. Their bell-like laughter was accompanied by the breeze, causing Wan Yanliang's heart to race. At that moment, he felt as though he could smell the fragrance of the other party's body. Prince. Song Qingshu took in Wan Yanliang's expression, hinting that he had already given it to him. If the other party really made such a shameless request, Song Qingshu would let him know what it meant to suffer a double loss. Hearing Song Qingshu shout, Wan Yanliang finally came back to his senses. In his heart, although beauty was important, his career was equally important. Thus, his eyes quickly became clear. Wan Yanliang, instead of answering Song Qingshu's question, he asked another question. Brother Tangqua, what do you think of the current situation in the imperial court? The situation in the imperial court? Song Qingshu did not know what Tangqua was referring to, so he organized his words and replied, A few years ago, the Mongols on the grasslands rebelled. The imperial court did not pay much attention to them because they wanted to attack the southern Song dynasty. In the end, they were attacked by the Mongols and lost a large part of their territory. But now the emperor is wise, the minister and the two prime ministers are experienced and prudent, and there are young and promising generals in the army. After many years of recuperation, the national strength of the Jin Kingdom has gradually recovered and recovered most of its strength. Before he could finish, Wan Yanliang stretched out his hand and interrupted, Brother Tangqua, I treat you as one of my own. Why do you have to use such clichés to brush me off? My opinion is exactly the opposite of yours. Wan Yanliang clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the distant northern sky. With a serious expression, he said, Although the Jin Kingdom has been working hard these past few years and has regained much of its strength, the Mongols have conquered one country after another. Now they are the strongest in the world. Fortunately, the Mongolians are currently focusing their attention on the west. That's why the countries in the Central Plains have the upper hand when we fight against them. But once the Mongolians finish conquering the west and move their main force to the Central Plains, that will be the start of the real disaster. Looking at Wang Yanliang's back, Song Qingshu laughed coldly in his heart. If someone who did not know the truth saw him like this, he might really think that he was a loyal and righteous man who cared about the country and its people. However, Song Qingshu quickly came to a realization. Although Wang Yenyang was shameless and lecherous, it didn't mean that he didn't want his country to become strong and even unify the world. Therefore, the Jin kingdom must become more powerful before the Mongols finish conquering the west. Suddenly, Wang Yanliang's expression darkened. Unfortunately, the imperial court seems to be thriving, but in reality, it is already in danger. What do you mean? Song Qingshu knew that Wang Yanliang was trying to frighten him, but he still played along and pretended to be shocked. Let's take what you just said for example. You said that His Majesty is wise and powerful. Wang Yanliang paused, a look of disapproval appearing on his face, but he quickly concealed it. That is true, but His Majesty is addicted to alcohol, and his health has been deteriorating in recent years. He is also easily angered and often kills his ministers. This is not a good sign. Song Qingshu's expression changed. Your Highness, are you saying that His Majesty is on the verge of death? He was not a Jin citizen, and he came from the future, so he did not have much respect for the emperor. Wang Yanliang was also surprised by his directness. He hesitated for a moment, but did not continue the conversation. Instead, he changed the topic and said, "Of the three great families in the capital, the Tanqua family is the weakest. Brother Tanqua, what do you think about this? Is he going to use the carrot and stick method?" Song Qingshu sneered inwardly, but pretended to be distressed. It's not just the weakest. This year, many people in the family are dissatisfied with me as the family head. I don't even know how much longer I can be the family head. Wang Yanliang was overjoyed. It's good that you know, so I won't have to waste my breath. Brother Tanqua, do you have any plans for the current situation? Wang Yanliang asked casually. Song Qingshu suddenly stood up and bowed. Please enlighten me, Your Highness. Brother Tanqua, what are you doing? Wang Yanliang hurriedly helped him up, a pleased look in his eyes. You and I are sworn brothers, there is no need to be so courteous. Fine, I'll tell you something from the bottom of my heart. If I offend you in any way, I hope Brother Tanqua will forgive me. I wouldn't dare. Song Qingshu thought to himself, what is Wang Yanliang trying to do? I consider Brother Tanqua one of my own, so I'll tell you the truth. However, I hope that you won't let anyone else know about this. Wang Yanliang paused, then added, not even goodbye. Even the song by Can't Do It? Song Qingshu exclaimed. Wang Yanliang nodded. Brother Tanqua is a hero of the world. I'm sure you've long since realized who caused your current predicament. Looking at Song Qingshu's gloomy face, Wang Yanliang continued, there's a saying in ancient times, femme fatale. Actually, it's full of wisdom. Gubai is the most beautiful woman in the Jin Empire. If you marry her, you'll make countless enemies. Song Qingshu opened his mouth and deliberately revealed a bitter smile. If I can win Gubai's favor, this is nothing. I've always admired the deep love between you and your husband. Wang Yanliang changed the topic. However, Brother Tanqua, a man can't live without power for a single day. I'm sure you've experienced the hardships of life. Are you willing to spend the rest of your life hiding in a bed of roses? This. Song Qingshu hesitated. Seeing that Tanqua's expression had softened, Wang Yanliang quickly added, even if Brother Tanqua is willing to live an ordinary life, I'm afraid it's impossible for you to spend the rest of your life with Gubai. What do you mean? Song Qingshu was also very curious about what Wang Yanliang could do. Brother Tanqua, do you still remember the courtesan of the fragrant autumn brothel? Seeing Song Qinshu nod, Wan Yanliang continued. She was also a member of the royal family and married Kai Jing's son. In terms of status and marriage, she was comparable to Gubai. But what happened in the end? Her husband was incapable and couldn't protect his wife. He could only watch as his wife became another man's plaything. Brother Tangqua, aren't you the least bit wary? Song Qinshu sneered inwardly. You're the one who's been eyeing Gubai the most, but you're still pretending to be a saint. Then what should I do? Song Qinshu cooperated and asked, What should I do? Let go of your love affairs and work hard to gain more power. In this world, power is the only thing you can rely on, Wan Yanliang said in a low voice. Song Qinshu hesitated. How do I gain more power? Wan Yanliang smiled but didn't answer. He picked up his teacup, leaned back in his chair, and slowly sipped his tea. Song Qinshu knew that Wan Yanliang was playing hard to get. His heart was as calm as still water, but his face was anxious. Your Highness, please teach me. Why should I teach you? Wan Yanliang said calmly. Song Qinshu knew that Wan Yanliang was doing this on purpose, so he pretended to choke. Wan Yanliang smiled and said, Brother Tangqua, even though you and I call each other one of our own now, we both know that we've never been on the same side. Furthermore, there are many things that we've said that are meant to hurt one's feelings, so how could I dare to say them to you? Chapter 808. Dare I ask, Wangye, how can we truly become one of our own? Song Qinshu's lips curled up, finally revealing his fox's tail. I need Brother Tangqua to prove your loyalty to me, Wan Yanliang said with an indescribable tone. I wonder if your Highness wants to prove his loyalty? Song Qinshu sneered inwardly. Wan Yanliang smiled and didn't answer. He stood up and looked towards the garden. Song Qinshu followed his gaze and saw Gu Bai talking to Princess Hailing with a smile. His face immediately darkened. Seeing that Tang Quobian didn't fly into a rage, Wan Yanliang was delighted. Tang Quobian's reaction meant that there was hope. And Wan XXXXXXX greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, $P. Brother Tangqua, please don't think that I'm lusting after your beauty. It's just that Gu Bai is the younger sister of the current emperor, and the emperor can't hear what I'm saying to you. In order to ensure that the secret doesn't get leaked, I had no choice but to do this. Only by doing this can we ensure that you won't betray us, Wan Yanliang explained with a sincere expression. I'm sorry, but I don't want to board such a ship. Song Qinshu suddenly stood up and pretended to leave. Wan Yanliang calmly said, Brother Tangqua, you seem to have a good impression of my princess. As expected, Song Qinshu paused. What do you mean, Prince? Wan Yanliang stood up and walked to Song Qinshu's side. I know it's hard for you to sacrifice your song for nothing. How about this, to show my sincerity? He paused and then whispered into Song Qinshu's ear, I can use my princess to exchange for it. In the end, he still made such a death-seeking request. Song Qinshu was filled with emotion. This Wan Yanliang really knew how to play. In his previous world, this kind of behavior was not recognized by the secular world. Even saying those two words was a sin. Since you want to die, then I'll let you experience what it means to accompany your wife and then lose your soldiers. Seeing that Tang Quobian had stopped moving, Wan Yanliang calmed down. He knew that Tang Quobian was tempted, but he had to add more fuel to the fire. Tu Danjing may not be as beautiful as Gu Bai, but she is still a famous beauty in the capital. Furthermore, she is my princess. In terms of status, you will not be at a disadvantage. Song Qinshu followed his gaze. Tu Danjing was delicate and elegant. She also had the grace and nobility of a Wang Fei. She really was a top-quality woman. But Gu Bai might not be willing. Song Qinshu swallowed his saliva and purposely made his voice hoarse, as if he had made a difficult decision. At the same time, he was laughing coldly in his heart. Of course, he would not sacrifice the Song Bai, but he was very interested in making Wanyan Liang pay for his wife. "It's done." Wanyan Liang was overjoyed. He hurriedly said, "Brother Tangqua, you don't know this. You could have not told her. Once it's done, only you and I will know. Isn't that better? Then, you won't have to deal with the aftermath, and you won't have to face her questions with guilt. I won't disturb you and your wife's normal life. You can continue living like before." "How can this be done?" Song Qingshu was surprised. He really didn't know. Wanyan Liang smiled strangely. He moved closer to him and whispered, "There are many ways, but using medicine is the simplest. However, if you want to pursue excitement and don't want to use medicine, there are other ways. For example, let her stay in a dark room with both of us standing outside the door. Then, after you have a conversation with her, I will enter the room. She won't be able to see my face in the dark, and because she has just spoken to you, she will subconsciously think that I am you. The rest will follow naturally." Song Qingshu was speechless. If this Wanyan Liang was in his previous life, he would definitely be admired by many. Even Edison Chen and teacher Li would probably be ranked below him. "I think the latter method is more exciting." Song Qingshu smiled strangely. "Since you want to play, let's play it big and make you regret it." "Right, I think so too." Wanyan Liang chuckled. Suddenly, he realized that he had lost some of his dignity as a prince. He hurriedly wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth and said seriously, "This matter is not very honorable. When the time comes, only you and I will know. If the women find out, I'm afraid it won't be easy to clean up." Of course, Song Qingshu knew that he was speaking the truth. Gu Bai was a princess and the younger sister of the current emperor. Tu Danjing was the precious daughter of the Tu Dan family's previous leader. She was now a noble princess. No matter which side caused trouble, it would be a very troublesome matter. Wanyan Liang came over and put his arm around his shoulder. He said affectionately, "Since we have reached an agreement, we can be considered one family from now on. Although there are many important things that I can't tell you now, I can let you know about other things." Song Qingshu had always been very curious about Wanyan Liang's plans. That was why he had feigned civility with him. Hearing this, he couldn't help but perk up his ears. "Brother Tangqua, His Majesty's health is getting worse and worse. If I may say something disrespectful, no one knows what will happen tomorrow." Wanyan Liang chuckled. "Brother Tangqua, when you went to Kaifeng last time, you probably wanted to earn some merit." Song Qingshu nodded and smiled bitterly. "Unfortunately, we failed on the verge of success. Guojing was rescued and I was taken captive. Not only did we not earn any merit, but we were also disgraced and disgraced." Wanyan Liang patted his shoulder. "Brother Tangqua, you don't need to take it to heart. You don't need such a small merit. Do you know what the greatest merit in the world is?" Song Qingshu was confused. "What is it?" Wanyan Liang leaned over with a mysterious expression and spat out 4 words. "The merit of following the dragon." Song Qingshu's expression changed. This Wanyan Liang was indeed scheming something big. "But this merit is not so easy to earn," Wanyan Liang continued. "Compared to adding flowers to a brocade, everyone in the world values timely help more. Moreover, those in power generally hate people who are easily swayed. So, you must choose the right person early in order to be able to take this great merit." "But doesn't His Majesty only have one son, Wei Wang?" Song Qingshu asked in confusion. "But His Majesty still hasn't officially named Wei Wang Crown Prince," Wanyan Liang said with a faint smile. "Besides, Brother Tangqua, have you forgotten that Taizu passed the throne to Taizong?" "You mean Chongqing Wang?" Song Qingshu exclaimed. He pretended to be enlightened, then stared at Wanyan Liang. "Which side does your highness stand on?" Wanyan Liang laughed. "This prince has revealed enough to you today. Let's wait until that matter is settled, then we can slowly discuss it." Song Qingshu's expression changed slightly. He knew that Wan Liang would not release the eagle until he saw the rabbit. Before obtaining the song bai, Wan Liang would not reveal any more useful information. Chapter 809. Wan Liang didn't want to talk about it any further. They only talked about romance and didn't talk about politics anymore. Song Qingshu also knew what was going on, so he didn't continue asking. The afternoon passed quickly. When he heard that Song Qingshu was going to attend Pucha's daughter's coming-of-age ceremony, Wan Liang smiled and said, "What a coincidence. The princess and I are going as well. Since that is the case, let's go together." Song Qingshu actually didn't want to be with him, but he couldn't refuse Wan Liang's kind invitation. In the end, in order to show his affection, Wan Liang even asked his servants to bring out his beloved luxurious carriage for the couple. Although Gubai kept hinting at him to reject, Song Qingshu knew what Wan Liang was thinking. It would be a waste not to take advantage of this situation. This carriage was as luxurious as a Rolls-Royce, and he must have gotten it from somewhere. Letting him bleed a little would be equivalent to enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. That's right, at the same time, it could also be considered compensation for the assassination attempt on his carriage. Before leaving, Consort Hailing suddenly pulled on Wan Liang's sleeve. Receiving a signal from his wife, Wan Liang apologized to Song Qingshu and Gubai. "I am truly sorry. Something went wrong with the gift we prepared for Pucha's daughter. We need to prepare it again. Would you like to leave first?" Although Song Qingshu was curious about what Dan Jing would say to Wan Liang, the other party had already tactfully asked him to leave. Of course, he had no reason to continue staying. After bidding farewell to Wan Liang, Song Qingshu supported Gubai's soft arm and entered the luxurious carriage. Seeing the carriage gradually disappear into the distance, Wan Liang's smile gradually disappeared. He turned to his wife and asked, "Little Jing, what is it?" "It's nothing. I am just curious why you value Tangquobian so much." Tu Danjing recalled Song Qingshu's little trick and her expression became unnatural. The Tangquo family only exists in name now. What good would it do to win him over? Tangquo's family is indeed a little weak now, but a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. After all, the Tangquo's family is one of the three great families of the Jin Kingdom and has a strong foundation, Wan Liang explained. Now that Tangquobian's career is at a low point, I'll help him in his hour of need. It'll be twice the result with half the effort. Tu Danjing said worriedly, but Tangquobian is on the Emperor's side. Aren't you afraid that he will betray us? Thinking of the Pledge of Allegiance, Wan Liang's heart warmed. He smiled and said, "I naturally have a way to ensure his reliability. But what about Song Bai?" The worry on Tu Danjing's face did not lessen at all. Gubai is the Emperor's biological sister. They have always had a good relationship. Even if Tangquobian is willing to rely on us, Gubai will never betray the Emperor. Once she learns something from Tangquobian, we will be in trouble. Wan Liang pulled his wife into his arms and said, "Don't worry, I've already set up a trap. Tangquobian won't dare to leak any information to Gubai. This is a public place. Don't be like this." Tu Danjing blushed and gently pushed her husband away. She looked at him curiously and asked, "What kind of trap is it? Can you tell me?" "If I tell you, it won't work. Don't worry, little Jing. When have I ever done something I'm not sure of?" Wan Liang's smile froze. "You are also a pawn in this trap. How can I tell you the truth?" Tu Danjing didn't know that she was also being plotted against by her husband. Hearing him say this, she didn't ask any more questions. She had a simple personality and didn't even know much about her husband's schemes. She only occasionally did her duty as a wife and reminded her husband. Because of Tu Danjing's gentle personality, Wan Liang especially liked her. Even though there were countless beautiful women around him, in his heart, Tu Danjing's position was incomparable. After Song Qingshu and Wanyan Liang left the Hailing Prince's mansion, Gubai quietly asked her husband, "Husband, what did you and Wanyan Liang talk about the whole afternoon?" "Nothing much, just some small talk. He hinted several times that he wanted to recruit me." Song Qingshu didn't tell her the truth. Because he was in the dark and Wanyan Liang was in the light, he was confident he could control the overall situation. But if he told Gubai about Wanyan Liang's dirty thoughts and she ran to the emperor to complain, then everything would be a mess. Jin Shizong would definitely pull Wanyan Liang over and reprimand him, but there was no proof. Moreover, Wanyan Liang hadn't actually committed a crime, so it would be difficult for Jin Shizong to do anything to Wanyan Liang. But if this happened, Wanyan Liang would definitely hate her. At that time, she would be in the light while he was in the dark. She would need to be on guard against his revenge, and it would be impossible for him to always be by Gubai's side. It would be impossible for him to ensure her safety. Recruit? Gubai frowned. Although the Hailing Prince seems like a modest gentleman on the surface, I always feel that there are too many things hidden in his eyes. You must be careful. I'll pay attention. Song Qingshu couldn't help but admire a woman's intuition. It had to be known that the current Wanyan Liang hadn't revealed the cruel and licentious side of him that he had shown in history. In the eyes of most of his subjects, he was recognized as a modest gentleman and a good prince. Of course, Madame Tang and a few others had already experienced the other side of his mask. For Gubai to be able to see that Wanyan Liang wasn't a good person in this situation was truly amazing. Gubai nodded. Although I don't like this person, I must admit that Wanyan Liang is indeed a talented person. He has become a minister and there aren't many people in the entire court that can compare to him. If my husband can obtain his help, it will definitely be beneficial to your career. Song Qingshu also felt the same way. Although history had blackened Wanyan Liang to the point where there wasn't a single piece of skin on his body, it was just that the winner was the king and the loser was the villain. After he became emperor, it was clear that he was a very capable person. It was a pity that his character was too vile, and in the end he was deserted by all his friends and family. As he was sighing with emotion, his heart suddenly went cold. He looked up and saw that the front door of the carriage had been blown to smithereens. A cold light filled with killing intent shot towards him. Gubai was worried that her words would be heard by the guards that Wanyan Liang had sent, so she had stuck close to Song Qingshu. Now that the cold light was coming towards her, she was the first to bear the brunt of it. The cold light was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived in front of Gubai. Her beautiful eyes were wide open, but the murderous aura was so solid that it caused her entire body to stiffen. She couldn't even move a finger. It's a pity that I won't be able to spend the rest of my life with my husband. Gubai closed her eyes, the only thought left in her mind. However, she didn't feel the pain that she had imagined. Instead, the raging waves in the carriage suddenly became as calm as still water. That solid killing intent left as quickly as it had come, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Gubai opened her eyes in astonishment. The scene in front of her stunned her. Just now, the cold light had come too quickly for her to see what it was. But now that the cold light had stopped, she could finally see its full appearance. It was a dagger suffused with cold air, and a black-clothed assassin was holding it in a stabbing position. The assassin's eyes were also indescribably shocked, because this dagger could no longer move forward, and all this was caused by two fingers, Song Qingshu's fingers. Song Qingshu held the dagger in his hand and carefully sized up the assassin in front of him. The assassin's black clothes covered all of his features. The only thing that could be seen was a pair of quick-witted eyes, a pair of very familiar eyes. "It's you again!" Song Qingshu and the assassin shouted at the same time. Song Qingshu's voice was filled with surprise, while the assassin's voice was filled with anger and depression. Gubai, who was at the side, was shocked. The assassin's voice was clear and delicate. It was obviously a young girl. Song Qingshu was even more speechless. What kind of luck did he have? He had helped Wanyan Liang block 2 assassination attempts. The first time was on the way to Xiaoxiang brothel, and now he was here again? It seemed like he shouldn't have been greedy and sat in Wanyan Liang's carriage. Before he could enjoy it, it was ruined by the assassin. If it wasn't for the fact that he was highly skilled in martial arts, he would have been killed by the assassin. Who would he cry to in the underworld? The young girl finally reacted and subconsciously tried to pull back her dagger. However, Song Qingshu was holding it in his hand and it wouldn't budge. She couldn't help but be angry and anxious. Let go! At this time, the imperial bodyguards outside also reacted. Song Qingshu's heart trembled. This young girl was trying to assassinate Wanyan Liang, so he didn't want to let Wanyan Liang off easily. Since he let her go once, he might as well let her go a second time. With a shake of his hand, a gentle force was transmitted to the young girl's body. The young girl originally wanted to snatch the dagger and retreat, but when the 2 forces overlapped, she flew back at an even faster speed. In the blink of an eye, she was on a roof more than 10 zhang away, causing the surrounding imperial bodyguards to pounce on empty air. The young girl didn't leave immediately. Instead, she stood on the roof and looked deeply at Song Qingshu, as if she wanted to memorize his appearance in her heart. The 2 of them looked at each other for 10 seconds before the young girl turned around and left, disappearing into the crowd of houses. This assassin's eyes look somewhat familiar. Song Qingshu frowned. He clearly felt that he would be able to guess who it was, but he was just a step away. Perhaps too many things have happened during this period of time. He didn't have an obsessive-compulsive personality, so when he couldn't remember, he just let nature take its course. He turned his head to look at Gu Bai and saw that her face was deathly pale. She was sitting there in a daze, not moving an inch. He couldn't help but feel pity for her. He reached out and hugged her. "Are you all right?" Unexpectedly, when his hand touched her shoulder, Gu Bai acted as if she was scalded by boiling water. She immediately sat up straight and avoided his hug. Noticing Song Qingshu's surprised expression, Gu Bai tucked her hair behind her ear and forced a smile. "I'm fine." Song Qingshu originally wanted to ask more questions, but the imperial bodyguards outside had all gathered around to greet him. He had no choice but to go out and make arrangements for them. Chapter 8:10. In order to put an end to the assassination attempt midway, the 2 had spent quite some time escaping from the bailiffs and patrolling soldiers who had rushed over upon hearing the news. Finally, they arrived at the main residence of the Pucha family. Not long after they entered, Pucha Ahyut received the news and came out to greet them. "Nephew, I heard that you encountered an assassin on your way here? Thank you for your concern, Uncle Pucha. We're not injured." Song Qingshu replied with a smile. He had done his homework before coming here. Pucha Ahyut was of the same generation as Tang Quobian's father, who had died on the battlefield, so it was only natural for him to address him as uncle. "Don't worry, nephew. I'm good friends with the garrison general. I'll ask him to send more people to investigate this matter and find the assassin. We'll give you a satisfactory explanation." Pucha Ahyut patted his shoulder in consolation. And *ba, unspecified currency. Less than or equal to *p. Thank you, uncle. Song Qingshu smiled and didn't take these polite words to heart. Since the assassin dared to assassinate a dignified prince, how could he be easily found by these soldiers? Moreover, he didn't want the assassin to be caught at all. "Please come in, the others are almost here." Pucha Ahyut personally led the 2 in. Pucha Chiozhao's coming-of-age ceremony had actually been completed in the ancestral hall in the morning, and the evening was more like a grand banquet. Unlike the Han style of Jiangnan, the Pucha family's banquet leaned more towards the Jurchen customs. It was held on a vast lawn, with a bonfire burning in the center. The flames greedily licked at the roasted lamb, and the air was filled with a mouth-watering fragrance of meat and all sorts of joyous singing. Song Qingshu and Tang Quobian's seats were arranged in front of them. After all, Gubai was a princess, and Tang Quobian was one of the 3 clan leaders. Even though they looked strong on the outside but were weak on the inside, there weren't many who could surpass them on the surface. Song Qingshu casually glanced at the people sitting in better seats than the 2 of them. He didn't recognize most of them, but judging from their positions and age, it wasn't hard to determine their identities. Aside from the members of Pu Cha's family, there was also an old man sitting at the head of the table. The only person who was qualified to sit in this position was the Grand Protector of the Imperial Court, the head of the 3 prefectures, the High Minister, the Commander-in-Chief, and the person in charge of the Imperial Court, Wanyan Zongxian. Song Qingshu's eyes narrowed. This Wanyan Zongxian was the great King Gai Tian that Zhao Fujin had mentioned before. Thinking of how he had allowed Zhao Gou's birth mother, Empress Dowager Wei, and his wife, Empress Xianjia, to serve him in the same bed, Song Qingshu was secretly furious. Though he was not from the Song dynasty, he was a Han, and he could not help but feel the same hatred for the enemy. This old fart looks virtuous and respectable on the outside, but he's secretly a bunch of thieves and prostitute. He's already so old, yet he's not afraid of getting a heart attack or a cerebral hemorrhage from playing around. Song Qingshu's face was filled with displeasure. He looked down and saw that the person sitting next to him was, without a doubt, the left Prime Minister, the King of Chao, and the left Deputy Commander-in-Chief, Wanyan Zongmin. He was brothers with Wanyan Zonggan, Zong Wang, and Zong Bai, who were famous figures in the northern Song dynasty. But these powerful brothers had passed away one after another, so he was the one in charge of the founding emperor's faction. Wanyan Liang was also from the founding emperor's faction, so he had to respectfully call him uncle in front of him. But what caught Song Qingshu's attention was the princess of Chao next to him. She looked to be in her early 30s, but her watery eyes darted around. One look and anyone could tell that she was not someone who would settle down. An old man with a young wife. It would be strange if there were no problems. Song Qingshu smiled and sighed with emotion. This princess of Chao was Pucha Alan, the sister of Pucha Ahu. Compared to her, who was married to the second in command of the imperial court, Tang Quobian's sister, Mrs. Tang, she could only marry an insignificant provincial governor. Although they were both from the 3 big families of the Jin kingdom, Tangqua's family was weak. The person sitting next to Zong Min should be the right prime minister, Wanyan Zongban. Not only was his position similar to Zong Min's, but his status in the family was also similar. Zong Min was the one in charge of the founding emperor's faction, while Zong Ben was the one in charge of the founding emperor's faction. Song Qingshu couldn't help thinking of the young girl, Wanyan Zhongjie, who was supposed to be the one in charge of the founding emperor's faction. Unfortunately, her grandfather, Zong Pan, was the one in charge of the founding emperor's faction. Unfortunately, a political struggle led to the execution of her grandfather and father, so Zong Ben became the one in charge of the founding emperor's faction. Speaking of the devil, Song Qingshu was thinking of Zhongjie when he suddenly saw a beautiful head poking out from behind Zong Pan. If it wasn't Zhongjie, who could it be? Noticing Song Qingshu's gaze, the young girl fiercely glared at him, causing Song Qingshu to be puzzled. When did I offend her? Song Qingshu was too lazy to delve into the young girl's thoughts and continued to observe the people in the hall. On the other side of the hall was an acquaintance. It was Chongxing Wang, whom Song Qingshu had met in Qiuxiang House. But when Song Qingshu glanced at him, his eyes were completely attracted to the woman next to him. Judging from her clothing, she should be Chongxing Wang's concubine, Tao Yao. Previously, people often talked about Chongxing Wang's beauty. Even the current Jin Emperor conferred her the title of Lady Peach Blossom. Before, Song Qingshu didn't understand why there was such a strange title. But now that he saw her in person, he immediately understood. Her face was like a peach blossom, her eyes were filled with affection, and the corners of her lips were slightly raised, as if there was a trace of a smile hanging on her face. Her beauty is definitely on par with Gobai's, Song Qingshu secretly exclaimed in admiration. But then he remembered that Gu Bai was beside him. If he kept staring at other women, wouldn't he hurt her feelings? He turned to look at Gu Bai, but found that she wasn't paying attention to him at all. Instead, she was staring at the bonfire in the middle of the hall in a daze. The light from the fire shone on her beautiful face, making her look even more beautiful. What's wrong with her? Song Qingshu was puzzled. Brother Tangqua, I'm really sorry. Song Qingshu looked up and saw Wan Yanliang and Dan Jing walking towards him. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and said, "It seems that Prince Tangqua's carriage is really not suitable for him." Wan Yanliang was also a little embarrassed and said, "Humph, I swear that I will catch that assassin and avenge Brother Tangqua." Song Qingshu secretly sneered. "Avenge yourself? After all, you won't be able to sleep well if there's an assassin with high martial arts skills watching over you at all times. Brother Tangqua, this is the second time you've saved my life." A playful smile suddenly appeared on Wan Yanliang's face as he said, "Don't worry, I'll definitely keep my promise. Whenever you're ready, Brother Tangqua, feel free to choose." Consort Hailing was confused and asked, "What do you mean by choose?" Wan Yanliang smiled and said, "Nothing, just that Brother Tangqua can choose whatever treasures in my residence." Chapter 8:11. Looking at her elegant face, Song Qing said with a double meaning, "Of course I won't refuse your Highness's generous gift. I'm just afraid that your Highness won't be able to bear it." Consort Hailing looked at him with slight annoyance. "Look at what the son-in-law is saying. Am I such a petty person? I'm relieved that your Highness says so." Song Qing smiled even more happily. Wan Yanliang's face darkened. He knew what Song Qing meant. Seeing his wife being fooled by him, even though he had decided to sacrifice his wife, he still felt a little sour. "Xiao Jing, it's about time. Let's go and sit down." Wan Yanliang felt that if he stayed any longer, a patch of grassland would grow out of his head. Thus, he hurriedly pulled his wife away. Tu Danjing didn't understand, but she couldn't disrespect her husband. She smiled apologetically at Song Qing and left with Wan Yanliang. "Since you wanted to win him over, why did you leave in such a hurry?" Tu Danjing asked in confusion. "It's nothing." Wan Yanliang shook his head, but he was secretly angry. "Tangqua bien, Tangqua bien, how dare you flirt with the princess in front of me? For the sake of the Song Jade Wall, I'll bear with it for now. When I get my hands on the Song Jade Wall, I'll deal with you." Thinking of Go Bai's peerless beauty, Wan Yanliang's heart subconsciously warmed up. After watching Wan Yanliang and his wife leave, Song Qing turned around and found that Go Bai was still in a daze. He couldn't help but help her up with concern. "Are you feeling unwell?" Being touched by his hand, Gu Bai's body visibly trembled. However, she quickly concealed it and forced a smile. "Perhaps I was frightened by the assassin. Right, husband, can you tell me more about what happened in Kaifeng City? Why do you suddenly care about this?" Song Qing asked in confusion. "No, nothing." Gu Bai lifted her skirt and sat down. "It's just that we had some conflicts a while ago, so I didn't ask about what happened to you in Kaifeng City." "I see. Overall, it was scary but not dangerous." Many people had asked this question before. Song Qing had already made up a perfect lie and told her the gist of it. Gu Bai listened attentively and did not say a single word. Her tranquil face seemed to have a soft glow, attracting countless men to peep at her. Song Qing was amused and annoyed at the same time. At the same time, a strong sense of pride rose in his heart. The woman in front of him had stunned countless men, and every inch of her body belonged to him. Song Qing's explanation was relatively brief. After Gu Bai heard it, she suddenly asked a question. "As far as I know, your sworn brother, Song Qing, is a famous top master in Jianghu. Didn't he save you when you were in danger?" Song Qing was shocked. His speech had indeed intentionally or unintentionally neglected the role of his real body. Could it be that Gu Bai had realized something when she suddenly asked such a question? When I got into trouble, he went somewhere else to take care of business. Later on, when he found out that I was captured by the beggar sect, he personally went to find Huang Rong. The two of them were friends for a while, so Huang Rong only let me go because of him. Otherwise, her husband would not have let me go so easily, even with Wan Yen Liang's help. Song Qing's mind worked like lightning, and he quickly came up with a reasonable explanation. I see. Gu Bai nodded thoughtfully. But why haven't I heard you mention this before? My sworn brother is, after all, the sworn enemy of the Qin kingdom. Naturally, he is also the sworn enemy of the Jin kingdom. His identity is very sensitive. I was worried that if I told him, it would cause trouble. Song Qing said without changing his expression. Gu Bai gave a slight nod. It was impossible to tell from her expression whether or not she agreed with this explanation. After a pause, she asked, "Yesterday, that sworn brother of yours suddenly burst into the manor. Afterwards, he disappeared without a trace. Do you know where he is now?" Looking at Gu Bai's clear and limpid eyes, Song Qing felt a little strange. He thought to himself, why did she suddenly put the blame on me? I'm not very sure. My sworn brother always comes and goes without a trace. Did he not contact you when he came to Daxing Manor? Gu Bai looked at him with a burning gaze. Maybe he wanted to find me last time and bumped into you, Song Qing answered instinctively. Really? Gu Bai's lips curled into a bitter smile. Then the next time he comes looking for you, call me along. Your sworn brother came to Daxing Manor. As his sister-in-law, I have to do my part as a host. Okay. Song Qing groaned inwardly. It was not easy to lie in this world. Often, a lie needed thousands of lies to make up for it. At the same time, Pucha Ahyut was comforting his precious daughter. Little grass, Yangguo will definitely come. Just wait a little longer. Humph. The others are already here, but he's still not here at this hour. He clearly doesn't care about me. What's the point of having a fiancé like him? Pu Cha Chiutsao pouted her lips so high that it seemed as if an oil pot could be hung from her mouth. Hee. Pu Cha Ahyut suddenly revealed a strange expression. Don't you not like him? Why are you still hoping for him to come? I don't like him, that's my business. But if he doesn't come, it means that he doesn't care about me. I can't take this lying down. Pucha Chiutsao stomped her feet. She seemed extremely indignant. Seeing his daughter's angry expression, Pucha Ahyut smiled bitterly. He was really old and didn't understand the minds of these young people. Little sister, don't worry. There's no way he won't come with such a grand invitation. A burly young man sitting at the side comforted her. If worst comes to worst, I'll beat him up when he comes. How about that? If Song Qing was here, he would recognize this tall young man as one of the two experts who followed Wan Yen Ping from the laundry yard, Pucha Shiji. Pucha Shiji was born with great strength and was later taught by a famous teacher. He was already recognized as the #1 expert among the younger generation of the Jin kingdom. Even when compared to the older generation experts, he was not at a disadvantage. Other than the mysterious and unpredictable minister of the imperial palace, de Xinghua, no one had the confidence to win against him. Today, Pucha Shiji had specially asked for leave from the laundry to come back to celebrate his sister's coming-of-age ceremony. He had doted on his sister since she was young and had beaten up many young masters in the capital for her sake. When he found out that Yang Guo, who was betrothed to his sister before she was born, had lost an arm, he subconsciously felt a little unhappy. He planned to teach Yang Guo a lesson and make him back off. Big brother loves little grass the most. Pucha Chiutsao skipped over and hugged her brother's arm, a smile blossoming on her face. You two, stop fooling around. Isn't Yang Guo here? Pucha Ahyut pointed at the group of people coming in from afar. When Pucha Chiotsao heard this, she immediately let go of her brother's arm and ran to the window to look out. Even though she was not satisfied with this marriage and had already made up her mind to tell her father no matter what the other party looked like, he was still her fiancé in name. In addition, she had never seen him before, so it was normal for her to be curious about his appearance. Pucha Chiotsao had originally only glanced at him casually. She had never seen Yangguo before, but she recognized him at a glance. Other than the empty sleeves, the desolate aura on him was too unique. It immediately attracted her attention. When she saw Yangguo's appearance clearly, she was stunned. A delicate and handsome face with sword-like eyebrows and a pair of phoenix eyes. Pucha Chiotsao's face reddened as she looked at him, and even began to feel sorry for him. This person's face was pale and haggard, and she wondered what sadness he had in his heart. Pucha Shiji also stood at the side and observed his brother-in-law in name, but he did not feel the same way as his sister. Instead, he felt that this person was unkempt and was not worthy of his sister. "Little sister, I'll help you teach him a lesson later. I'll help you vent your anger." Okay." Pucha Chiotsao did not hear what her brother said at all. Her eyes were filled with Yangguo's figure. Song Qing was also looking at Yangguo at this moment, and realized that he did not come alone. There was a middle-aged man beside him. Although Song Qing did not know him, he had gathered information that this middle-aged man was called Wanyan Zongxian. He was an official in the Ministry of Rites, and was the person in charge of the king of Zhao, Wanyan Honglia's faction. Different from the Han dynasty, in the Jin kingdom, the power was mainly in the Shangshu province and the marshal's office, while the 6 ministries were just some auxiliary yamen. The Ministry of Rites sounded impressive, but in fact it did not have much power. This also showed how weak the king of Zhao's faction was. Yangguo was the eldest grandson of the king of Zhao, Wanyan Honglai, so it was only natural that he would be together with Wanyan Zongxian. Everyone had arrived, and the banquet officially began. After a series of tedious and boring formalities, Pucha Ahyut completed his daughter's coming-of-age ceremony. Next up was the most interesting segment, where Pucha Chiotsao would perform a dance to thank all the guests who had come to congratulate her. This segment was interesting for 2 reasons. First, it was because a beautiful girl's dance was always pleasing to the eye, and second, she would invite a young man to dance with her after her dance. This man was not randomly chosen, but usually an unmarried man, and the person chosen was usually the girl's sweetheart. Unlike the reserved Han women, the grassland women expressed their love passionately and directly. Song Qing sighed inwardly. At the same time, he found it strange that Gu Bai would take the initiative to explain this to him, as if she knew that he did not understand. Chapter 8:12. Women from the plains are indeed different from Han women. Song Qing sighed. This Pucha Chiotsao was only 14 years old, but she didn't seem like a little lowly at all. She was tall, and her thighs were fair and round. Her breasts were quite impressive, and she looked like a beautiful girl in spring. Song Qing was extremely excited, not because of the beauty of the girl before him. After all, he had seen too many beauties. Although this Pucha Chiotsao was pretty, her looks were far from being able to move his heart. The reason he was so excited was because of the dress she was wearing. It was said that all Jurchen girls would wear this dress when they came of age, but in Song Qing's eyes, the style of this dress was not much different from the miniskirts in the cities of his previous world. What a tearful face! Song Qing had been in this world for a few years now. Although the dresses of the women in this world were also very beautiful, they were more of a classical beauty. Not to mention revealing thighs, even showing a bit of flesh was considered indecent. Thinking of the fair thighs that filled the streets in summer in his previous world, Song Qing couldn't help but sigh. I never thought that I would have the chance to see such a beautiful scenery in this life. If I have the chance to rule the world one day, I will definitely promote miniskirts throughout the country. Pucha Chiuzao's hair was tied into small bundles, and it was obvious that it had been meticulously woven. Every small braid was adorned with a few small jadeite ornaments, looking a little like the playful braids that were popular in the cities of his previous world. She looked like she was filled with the vitality of spring. Coupled with her fair thighs and the soft miniskirt that occasionally rose as she danced, it formed an absolute territory that made one's heart throb. The girl was like a fairy of the plains, dancing gracefully by the bonfire. Many of the youths present swallowed their saliva, secretly guessing who would be the lucky one to be invited to be her dance partner. The daughter of the Pucha family is indeed beautiful. Gubai sighed. Song Qing's heart skipped a beat, and he went over with a smile. Why don't we have a beautiful daughter too? Hearing his words, Gubai's face paled, but she quickly concealed it. You're so ugly, your daughter will definitely not be pretty. Song Qing quietly hugged her slender waist and said with a smile, although I'm a little ugly, you're so beautiful. Our daughter will definitely look like you. Gubai's body stiffened. She twisted her waist and unobtrusively let go of his hand. She then changed the topic. Who do you think Autumn Grass will choose as her dance partner later? Song Qing thought that she was embarrassed in public and did not take it to heart. He smiled and said, Isn't it obvious? Although she was thanking everyone in the audience, she was intentionally or unintentionally hanging around Yang Guo. The time she danced in front of him was more than the time she danced in front of everyone else combined. Gubai nodded slightly. That's right, Brother Yang's appearance is indeed very attractive to women, but it's a pity that he lost an arm. Wanyan Honglai, Emperor Taizu, and Emperor Taizong were of the first generation. Yang Kong, Wanyan Zongkong, Wanyan Zonggan, Zong Wang, Zong Bai, Zong Xian, and Zong Min were of the second generation. The current emperor and Wanyan Liang were of the third generation. Yang Guo, Gubai, and Tang Quobian were also of the third generation. In terms of bloodline, Yang Guo was Gubai's distant cousin. Song Qing shook his head. That's not true. Brother Yang may have lost an arm, but he has a proud and indomitable character. In addition, he has practiced peerless martial arts. Who knows how many people in this world can't compare to him? What about you? How do you compare to him? Gubai suddenly turned around, her eyes sparkling. Me? Song Qing's expression froze for a moment, then he quickly laughed. First of all, my bearded face is far inferior to Brother Yang's in terms of appearance. Naturally, I can't compare to him. Gubai shook her head. Her eyes seemed ethereal. In my heart, my husband is the most handsome man in the world. Song Qing thought to himself, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. No matter how you look at Tang Quobian, he can't be called handsome. I didn't expect Gubai and Wanyan Ping to be so deeply in love with him. Ha ha ha, you're making me feel embarrassed. Song Qing subconsciously reached out to hug her. Gubai's body stiffened again. Perhaps she was infected by the joyous atmosphere, but this time she didn't avoid him. Instead, she pressed her face against his shoulder. Her expression was complicated. Back then, we promised to live together until our hair turns white. Can you still keep that promise? Of course. Song Qing was stunned. He didn't know if he was imagining things, but after the assassination attempt, Gubai seemed to have become a little strange. In the future, when we have a child, his surname must be Tangqua. You have no objections? Gubai said quietly. If I don't believe you, what surname can Tangqua have? Song Qing was secretly shocked. Why did she sound like she already knew that he wasn't her husband? But if she really did know, why was her reaction so calm? Remember what you promised me today. Gubai's face suddenly brightened. I've even thought of a name. If it's a son, he'll be called Tang Quanyen. If it's a daughter, she'll be called Tang Quasi. Tang Quanyen? Tang Quasi? Song Qing's expression changed slightly. Just as he was about to say something, the atmosphere of the banquet reached its climax. Pucha Qiucao finished the last part of the dance and stopped in front of Yang Guo. Her face was slightly red as she stared at him. Pucha Ahu, who had been paying attention to his daughter, couldn't help but feel comforted. Since Xiao Chao has taken a liking to Yang Guo, this is the best ending. My old face has been saved, and I won't have to break off the engagement. All the youths looked at Yang Guo enviously, but the host of the banquet didn't seem to notice. He shook his head coldly. I don't know how to dance. As soon as he said this, some were happy, while others were sad. Many youths' eyes lit up again. If that was the case, would Pucha Qiucao choose him? Pucha Qiucao didn't expect this answer. After a slight pause, she pursed her lips and said, I can teach you. Unfortunately, Yang Guo still shook his head. Find someone else. He then went back to drinking. In the quiet of the night, Yang Guo often asked himself why his relationship with his aunt was so bumpy. Aside from the moral shackles of the world, he believed that it was because of his frivolous words and actions in Wuji. He had unintentionally stirred up too many young girls, causing Xiao Longnu to misunderstand him multiple times, adding to the many twists and turns in their relationship. When he understood all this, he began to be strict with himself. He no longer did anything that would cause other girls to misunderstand him. Pucha Qiucao's dance partner was special, so of course he had to stay far away from her. Chapter 8:13. Pucha Qiucao stood there in a daze, as if she hadn't heard Yang Guo's rejection. When she finally came back to her senses, her eyes instantly reddened. She wiped her eyes and ran away without looking back. Her sobs could still be heard faintly in the air. No one had expected such a turn of events, and they all stared at each other in dismay. Pucha Qiucao's expression was even more unsightly, but he was an experienced and prudent man and didn't say anything. On the other hand, Pucha Shiji couldn't take it anymore when he saw his sister being wronged. He strode over to Yang Guo and said coldly, I've heard that Brother Yang is a famous expert in the Han world, but the Han have always been weak. No one can tell how much of a reputation you have. I am Pucha Shiji, and I would like to see Brother Yang's skills and see if your reputation is undeserved. Yang Guo looked at him indifferently, showing no intention of accepting the challenge. It's an undeserved reputation to begin with, so how can it be undeserved? There's no need to fight, I'm not your match. Seeing Yang Guo admit defeat didn't make Pucha happy at all. From his opponent's words, he could tell that Yang Guo wasn't really admitting defeat, but just didn't want to fight him. We'll only know if we fight. Pucha didn't hold back and threw a punch at Yang Guo. Yang Guo's heart skipped a beat. Before Pucha Qiucao's fist even reached him, the violent wind generated from it had already forced the people around him to retreat. Many of them couldn't even open their eyes. Seeing Pucha Qiucao's bloodshot eyes, Yang Guo didn't dare bet that Pucha Qiucao wouldn't take the chance to kill him if he didn't fight back. Left with no other choice, he met the attack head-on. The fist and palm collided. Pucha Qiucao's body shook, while Yang Guo took a few steps back before he could stabilize himself. What strength! Yang Guo stretched his numb wrist. Of all the people he'd met, only Jinluan Fuang's disciple, De Erba, was born with divine strength, but this person in front of him was even stronger. What top expert of the pugilistic world? Nothing more than this, Pucha Qiucao said coldly. Although Yang Guo was feeling a little lonely from the continuous setbacks, he was still a proud and unruly man. Pucha Qiucao's provocation immediately stirred up his arrogance. Same to you. Pucha Qiucao flew into a rage and roared, again, and pounced at Yang Guo. Why did you guys suddenly start fighting? Today is Xiaocao's good day. What if something happens? Gubai couldn't help but frown slightly when she saw the two of them fighting back and forth. Don't worry, Song Qin consoled. They're both experts, they know their limits. There won't be any problems. Which one of them do you think will win? Song Qing suddenly turned around and looked at Song Qing. Song Qing didn't worry and answered, Pucha Qiutsao was born with divine strength, and judging from his breathing, he must have learned a very high level of internal energy. Every time he attacks, he has the strength of a dragon and an elephant. Although Yang Guo has lost an arm and looks weak, his palm strength was trained in the strong winds and tide. In terms of palm strength, he's not any weaker than Pucha Qiutsao. Add to that the fact that he's learned a lot of high-level martial arts, I'm more optimistic about Yang Guo's chances in a real fight. Song Bai's face darkened as she watched Song Qing speak with assurance, and she sighed inwardly. But when Song Qing turned around, she put on a smile, as if nothing had happened. The situation seems to be pretty much what you predicted. Song Bai opened her mouth in surprise. The battle between the two was reaching its climax, but even someone like her, who didn't know any martial arts, could see some clues. Although Pucha Qiutsao's palm strength was strong, Yang Guo's lightness kung-fu was extremely profound. Out of 10 moves, Yang Guo could dodge about 7 and easily neutralize the remaining 3. On the other hand, Pucha Qiutsao could only take each of Yang Guo's counterattacks head-on. Even with his divine strength, Pucha Qiutsao was finding it hard to endure. What kind of hero are you if you only know how to dodge? If you have the ability, fight me with a single palm. Pucha Qiutsao was also feeling quite depressed from the fight. Seeing an opening, he jumped out of the ring and shouted. Yang Guo didn't chase after him. Hearing Pucha Qiutsao's challenge, the young man's temperament was stimulated, and he simply replied, "All right." Pucha Shiji took a deep breath and straightened his back, the bones in his body creaking. Even before he unleashed his palm strike, his aura was already rising rapidly. The surrounding people all sucked in a breath of cold air, wondering how earth-shattering this palm strike would be. On the contrary, Yang Guo simply placed his palm in front of his eyes and closed his eyes at the same time, sinking into a state of extreme tranquility. Even the chief steward of the great Qing kingdom wouldn't dare to take little Jie's full strength head-on. Brother Yang, you're underestimating your opponent too much. Song Bai subconsciously pinched the silk handkerchief in her hand and said with some worry. Song Qing smiled and explained, this move of Yang Guo's is called the shadowed palm. The key lies in the coordination of one's state of mind. The external performance isn't that important, but the power is incomparably great. Speaking of which, I'm more worried about Pucha Qiutsao. He was also shocked. After not seeing Yang Guo for a period of time, Yang Guo's cultivation had actually improved so much. At this moment, the aura that was faintly emitted from his body was something ordinary people couldn't see, but how could Song Qing not see it? With Yang Guo's combat strength as the center, an area of 3 feet around him seemed to have fallen into a kind of absolute silence. Even the flow of air had slowed down a lot, as if he wasn't standing in the air, but in viscous water. It's likely that after learning about his origins, his state of mind is more in line with the concept of the shadowed palm. That's why there's such a huge improvement. Song Qing secretly guessed. Shadowed palm. Song Bai silently muttered these few words, her expression suddenly becoming extremely desolate. If others were to look closely, they would feel that her current expression was extremely similar to Yang Guo's. At this moment, Song Qing's attention was completely focused on the 2 people in the field. He heard Pucha Qiutsao roar, and his whole body seemed to have transformed into a raging bull, charging towards Yang Guo with great momentum. Yang Guo also suddenly opened his eyes, and at that moment, the people nearby even had an illusion that Yang Guo's eyes seemed to have exploded with great vigor. The fist and palm collided, and the energy dispersed in all directions, causing the people nearby to fall one after another, and the wine glasses and fruit plates on the table next to them all cracked. Unlike the last time, it wasn't Yang Guo who retreated this time. Pucha Qiutsao let out a loud cry, and his whole body involuntarily streaked across the air in a parabola, crashing into a distant tree. Pucha Chiotsao, who had been watching from the side, jumped in fright, thinking that her brother had made a move for her, and if he crashed into the tree at such a fast speed, wouldn't he be seriously injured? With a thought, she rushed forward, trying to catch her brother in the air. Seeing this scene, Yang Guo's expression immediately changed. With a tap of his foot, he rushed forward and caught Pucha Chiotsao in his arms before the two came into contact, twisting his body in midair and moving a foot horizontally, dodging the oncoming Pucha Chiotsao. Being in Yang Guo's arms, surrounded by a strong masculine aura, Pucha Chiotsao raised her head to look at the handsome face right in front of her, and her face immediately turned bright red. "What are you doing? Let me go, I want to save my brother." As if she could feel the strange gazes of the people around her, Pucha Chiotsao felt very embarrassed, and her whole body struggled, at the same time raising a fist to punch Yang Guo's chest. "Your brother is fine," Yang Guo said lightly. "Ah." Pucha Chiotsao did not understand and followed his gaze, only to see her brother getting up from the ground, as if nothing had happened. "Little sister, don't worry, I don't have a single injury on my body. This young guy's palm strength is only SOSO. Pucha Chiotsao was the #1 expert of the younger generation of the Jin Kingdom, and he boasted of his innate divine strength. Now that he was sent flying by Yang Guo's palm in a head-on collision, he could not help but feel a little embarrassed. When he heard his sister shouting that she would come to save him, his face turned even redder, and he subconsciously responded. Who knew that as soon as he finished speaking, he heard a cracking sound behind him. Pucha Chiotsao turned his head in shock, and found that the tree he had crashed into had snapped in the middle, and was now slowly falling to the ground. Even people who didn't know martial arts could see that Yang Guo was being lenient. He used the hitting the bull through the mountain method to move his palm towards the tree. Otherwise, if the palm had landed, even the tree, which would require several people to wrap their arms around it, would have snapped in half. How could a human's body of flesh and blood withstand it? Pucha Chiotsao also understood that it was actually very dangerous for her to hastily rush to fetch her brother. If Yang Guo had not flown over to save her, she might have died on the spot. So I was wrong about him. Pucha Chiotsao secretly glanced at Yang Guo, her heart beating faster than before. Unfortunately, he had already let go of her and silently walked back. Thinking of the warm embrace just now, Pucha Chiotsao could not help but feel a sense of loss. "If I had known, I wouldn't have struggled just now. Ha ha ha, both of you are highly skilled in martial arts." This competition was truly marvelous, especially when nephew Yang saved the damsel in distress at the end. It is truly a beautiful story. Wanyan Zongxian, who was sitting at the head of the table, stood up and applauded, trying to smooth over the awkwardness between the two sides. As soon as Wanyan Zongxian opened his mouth, the rest of the people also followed suit, quickly diluting the awkward atmosphere caused by Yang Guo's rejection of Pucha Chiotsao. Pucha Ahyut also took the opportunity to speak, not mentioning the previous incident. Just like that, the storm was reduced from a big one to a small one, and many of the people present secretly let out a sigh of relief. Everyone tacitly agreed that tonight's main character, Pucha Chiotsao, had already danced. Next, it was time for the rest of the people to dance. When he found out that the rest of the people still wanted to dance, Song Qing could not help but feel his scalp go numb. Unlike the Han people, the people of the prairie, regardless of gender, were all skilled in singing and dancing. But how could he know the dance of the maiden tribe? Not to mention now, even in his previous life, he did not know how to dance. "Qianbei, don't come find me for a dance." Song Qing glanced at Gubai, secretly praying. Chapter 8:14. Song Qingshu smiled bitterly to himself, but he soon realized that something was wrong. "Uncle Tangqua?" He raised his head in surprise and saw a pretty girl standing in front of him, smiling at him. Who else could it be but Wanyan Zhongjie? Noticing the murderous looks in the eyes of the men around him, Song Qinshu smiled bitterly to himself. No wonder these men were so angry. He had already married the most beautiful woman in the Jin kingdom, and now she was taking the initiative to come to him. It would be strange if they weren't angry. But why was Zhongjie looking for him? Although there was no written rule, it was generally accepted that unmarried men would dance with unmarried men, and married men would dance with their spouses. She knew that Tang Quobian was married, and his wife was by his side. Was it really appropriate for her to come here and invite him? Song Qinshu really wanted to agree to her, not because it would be romantic to be with a beautiful girl, but because he was very curious about why this girl always seemed to be against him. The two of them obviously had no grudges in the past, and there was no enmity between them in the past. Could it be that Tang Quobian bullied her before and then abandoned her? In Song Qinshu's mind, he even thought of some third-rate romance dramas from his past life, but he quickly rejected it. After all, he was very sensitive to the inexplicable sense of familiarity with Zhongjie. The two of them must have met somewhere before, but after thinking for a long time, he still couldn't remember where. Although Song Qinshu wanted to take the opportunity to test her, he knew his own limit. He didn't know how to dance the Jin kingdom, and he would be exposed the moment he appeared. What's wrong? Does Uncle Tang Qua dislike Zhongjie? The girl put her hands behind her back and moved her upper body closer to him, looking very cute and lovely. Just as Song Qinshu was having a headache over how to reject her, Gubai, who was standing beside him, said with a smile, "You mischievous girl, go find another boy. Your Uncle Tang Qua is your aunt's. If he wants to dance with someone, it should be me." After saying that, Gubai turned her head and smiled sweetly at Song Qinshu. "Right, my husband?" Song Qinshu nodded blankly, but Gubai had already reached out and pulled him to the center of the dance floor, leaving Zhongjie standing there and stomping his feet in anger. "Zhongjie, why don't we dance together?" A young man who had been watching Zhongjie came over with a smile. "Get lost." The girl spat out coldly and turned to leave without looking at him. The young man was immediately ridiculed by his companions around him. Looking at the beautiful back view of Zhongjie as she left, the young man felt both love and hate. He quietly scolded, pretending to be a pure young girl. With a mother like that, how could a daughter be any better? But she has a lot of godfathers, and there aren't many people in the capital who dare to bully her. Don't say that the grapes are sour because you can't eat them. Zhongjie is different from her mother. Have you ever heard of her being intimate with a man? Another young man, who was probably Zhongjie's admirer, subconsciously put in a good word for his dream lover. That's just because you don't know about it. Who knows if she's secretly seducing people? Didn't she just seduce the one from Tangqua's family? The young man from before sneered. Song Qinshu faintly heard the discussion of the group of youths, and he frowned slightly. He did not expect Zhongjie to have so many hardships behind her cheerful and lively appearance. He did not know what kind of person the mother these youths were talking about was. "What are you thinking about?" Gubai's gentle voice rang out. Song Qinshu came back to his senses and smiled slightly. "I'm thinking about how you, as an elder, are jealous of the younger generation." "No way." Gubai blushed slightly. "I'm doing it for what?" Song Qinshu asked reflexively. "It's nothing." Gubai shook her head slightly and held his hand. "Let's dance." Song Qinshu groaned inwardly. He didn't know how to dance at all. Wasn't he going to be exposed soon? In a flash, an idea came to him, and he glanced at the men and women who were singing and dancing nearby. Perhaps it was because of his dual souls that his spiritual power was much higher than that of an ordinary person. He could even learn martial arts after just one look. After watching the other enlightened ones dance for a short while, he quickly learned the basics of the dance. Although he only learned the form but not the spirit because he didn't explain it in detail, it was enough to deal with an emergency. Gubai was also very surprised that Song Qinshu could dance so well. She had expected him to have no idea how to dance at all. How was it? Did your husband dance well? If it wasn't for the fact that he was staring at Tang Quobien's mask, Song Qingshu really wouldn't have dared to dance such a shameful dance. Looking at the other party's smug expression, Gubai did not know why, but she felt as if her gloomy mood from before had been swept away. She burst into laughter and hurriedly covered her mouth with her hands. Her snow-white and delicate hands and her tender lips reflected off each other, forming an extremely beautiful picture. I don't know where you learned this from. Even though it looks similar on the surface, the rhythm is completely wrong. Follow me, I'll teach you. Gubai held his hand, one teaching and one learning, and the two of them slowly began to dance in the corner. Smelling the light fragrance from Gubai, Song Qingshu was secretly shocked. Why didn't she react when she found out that I didn't know how to dance? Did Tang Quobian not know how to dance before? After thinking for a long time, he could only think of this explanation. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. I've been so worried for so long. If I had known this would happen, I would have said it directly. With the guidance of a famous teacher like Gubai, Song Qingshu's dancing became better and better. Their dance moves also became more and more harmonious. After an unknown amount of time, a round of applause rang out from the side. What a loving couple! Gubai seemed to suddenly wake up and pushed Song Qingshu away. She returned to her seat and drank a cup of wine. Her face was slightly red, but it wasn't clear whether it was because of the wine or embarrassment. Song Qingshu turned his head and saw Wanyan Liang standing there. He couldn't help but smile. Your Highness is too kind. Wanyan Liang's mind was still thinking about Gubai's slender, snow-white neck when she was drinking. He even suspected that if there was no one else present, he wouldn't be able to control himself and run up to her to hug and kiss her. Moreover, when Gubai pushed her husband away, she revealed her bashfulness. It was like a cat was scratching his heart. Song Qingshu's voice woke him up. He took the opportunity to pull Song Qingshu aside and whispered, "About the matter we discussed earlier, why don't we do it tonight?" Chapter 8:15. Wan Yinliang frowned. He thought for a moment and sighed. You're right. Tonight was a bit too rushed. Although he was lustful, that didn't mean he was a fool. Whether it was Gubai or Tu Danjing, they weren't easy to trick. If he didn't plan carefully and acted hastily, it would be easy for the two women to find out. The two women had special identities. No matter who found out the truth, the consequences would be unbearable. In the end, Wan Yinyang restrained himself and whispered, "Then let's find another time to make a good plan. We must ensure that nothing goes wrong. Let's forget about it today." That's what I was thinking. Song Qingshu nodded, but he sneered inwardly. This Wan Yenliang really was a pervert. In order to obtain someone else's wife, he was willing to sacrifice his own wife. Who knew what he was thinking? Now that the banquet was coming to an end, Wan Yenliang casually chatted with him for a bit before taking his leave. Gubai took this opportunity to walk over and said with a puzzled expression, "It feels like the king of Hailing values you a lot these days, but you didn't know each other before. It's probably because we went through so much together during the trip to Kaifeng." Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. This Wan Yenliang doesn't value me. He clearly values you. Perhaps. Gubai nodded. Tonight's banquet is almost over. I've already spoken to Pu Cha's family. How about we leave now? That's fine. There were too many people here. Song Qingshu was worried that he might run into an old friend of Tangqua's. It would be troublesome if he didn't recognize them. Moreover, he had another reason. Last night, he and Gubai had been intimate. That wonderful feeling left him reminiscing. He couldn't wait to go home and enjoy the pleasures of the bedroom with her. When they left Pu Cha's house, Tangqua's carriage was already waiting at the door. After experiencing 2 assassination attempts, Song Qingshu didn't dare to sit in Wan Yenliang's carriage again. Even if it was as luxurious as a Rolls-Royce, he wouldn't sit in it. In order to make Gubai feel at ease, he had double the number of guards from his home. After the two of them got on the carriage, Gubai casually sat on the side of the carriage and lifted the curtains to look at the scenery outside. Seeing that she was sitting so far away from him, Song Qinshu didn't mind. He leaned against the wall on the other side of the car and carefully admired Gubai's beautiful side profile. It was so soft that it looked like it had been drawn by a single stroke. The two of them remained in a stalemate for a while. Although Gubai did not look at Song Qinshu, she could still feel his gaze. His gaze was almost tangible, and wherever it landed on her, that part of her body would heat up. Gubai's ears gradually turned red. She couldn't hold it in any longer. She turned around and glanced at Song Qinshu. "Why are you staring at me like that? You're so beautiful!" Song Qinshu praised sincerely. "It's been so many years." Gubai suddenly paused and then sighed. "It's been so many years. Haven't you seen enough? You're so beautiful, it's not enough even if I look at you for a lifetime," Song Qinshu blurted out. "For a lifetime?" Gubai muttered to herself. In the end, she still shook her head. "When I become an old and ugly grandmother in the future, I don't believe that you'll still like me like this." Song Qinshu shook his head. "Even if you become an old woman, you'll still be the most beautiful old woman in the world." Gubai rolled her eyes at him. "Since when does an old woman have to distinguish whether I'm beautiful or not? Of course others don't, but you're an exception." Song Qinshu looked at her with a smile. Gubai couldn't take it anymore. All right. In the past, Wagula didn't have so many sweet nothings like you." Unfortunately, Song Qinshu's attention was completely focused on her outstanding beauty. For a moment, he didn't understand the meaning of her words. Just like that, the two of them returned to the Tangqua mansion. Holding Gubai's hand, he helped her out of the carriage. Song Qinshu deliberately didn't let go. Gubai subconsciously wanted to shrink back, but Song Qinshu didn't seem to want to let go. After a few times, Gubai was worried that her movements would attract the attention of the servants, so she blushed and let him do as he pleased. When she was led all the way back to the bedroom, she finally lost her composure. Her beautiful face turned pale. What are you doing?" Song Qinshu moved closer to her ear and chuckled. "Sleeping, of course." Gubai's expression changed. She subconsciously wanted to push him away. "But now it's still so early. It's already dark." "How is it early?" Song Qinshu grabbed her waist and pulled her into his arms. "We were woken up so early in the morning. Now we should catch up on some sleep." Before Gubai could react, she felt the world spinning. The next moment she was already in his arms. She finally panicked and struggled. "Don't put me down." Song Qinshu only thought that it was because she was shy, so he didn't mind and directly kissed her cherry lip. About 10 minutes later, Gubai struggled to push him away. Her hair was messy and her breathing was rapid. "No, not today." "Why not?" Song Qinshu was stunned. "Anyway, no means no." Gubai suddenly raised her voice and shouted. Seeing the surprised look in his eyes, she came to her senses. "I'm not feeling well today." "You're not feeling well? I'll find a doctor to check on you right away." Song Qinshu hurriedly stood up. No need." Noticing that his eyes were full of concern, Gubai was slightly dazed. "I'm on my period." Song Qinshu was stunned at first, and then came to his senses. He couldn't be so unlucky. It just happened to be her period. Wasn't she fine last night? However, there was nothing he could do about it. He wouldn't have any beastly thoughts in such a situation. "I'm not feeling well. I'll go back and rest first." Gubai left these words. Without waiting for him to agree, she hurriedly got up and left, leaving only a faint fragrance in the air. Song Qinshu stretched out his hand. In the end, he didn't force her to stay. He could only lie on the bed alone and stare blankly. When Gubai returned to her room, she could no longer hold back her tears. "Wagula, how could you be so cruel? We once promised to spend the rest of our lives together. During the assassination attempt in the afternoon, when Song Qingshu had casually blocked the assassin's earth-shattering sword strike with his finger, Gu Bai's heart had not been happy at all. She knew her husband too well, and her husband definitely did not have such a high level of martial arts. Previously, when her husband came home, she didn't think too much about his strange behavior because the two of them were in a cold war. Now that she started to suspect something, all sorts of clues appeared clearly in her mind. Coupled with the strange feeling she felt when she was intimate with him last night, she finally realized that he wasn't her husband. Since that person wasn't her husband, but after so long, the real Tang Quobian still hadn't appeared. It was obvious that he was dead. Who is he? After an unknown amount of time, Gu Bai finally wiped the tears on her cheek. Her eyes began to focus again. Could he be the murderer who killed Wogala? Gu Bai felt her whole body tense up when she thought about how she had made love to the person who might have killed her husband last night. No, that's not right. That person has Wogu La's personal seal. Unless Wogala comes out himself, no one else would know of its existence. Gu Bai was confused again. What puzzled her the most was why this person looked exactly like Wogala. After thinking for a long time, Gu Bai felt her mind getting more and more confused. But there was one thing she was sure of, and that was that she couldn't let him find out that she already knew the truth. But do I have to keep tacitly agreeing to our relationship as husband and wife? Gu Bai hesitated. Today, she had used the excuse of being physically inconvenient to reject him. But what about in the future? Was she going to reject him like this every time he tried to be intimate with her? As time went on, it would definitely arouse his suspicions. Quickly find out if he's the murderer who killed Wogala. Gu Bai stood up and opened the cabinet next to her. She took out a box from the corner and took out a dagger that gleamed with a cold light. This was her chastity guard. Ever since she married Tang Quobian, she had sealed it away. She didn't expect it to see the light again. She had already thought it through. If the other party really was Wogu La's murderer, then she would definitely avenge her husband. As for the powerful martial arts that the other party had displayed, she didn't take it to heart. No man would be on guard against the woman beneath him when they were intimate. If the other party wasn't Wogu La's murderer but the person she guessed, then it would be a blessing in disguise. Just like what she had thought at the banquet earlier, she could just play dumb for the rest of her life and leave her husband a descendant. As for whether the child was her husband's, as long as the child still had the surname Tangqua, it didn't matter. If Song Qingshu knew what Gu Bai was thinking at this moment, he would definitely look at her in a different light. Because he had always thought that Gu Bai was graceful and weak in his heart. He didn't expect that in the face of such a shocking change, she could weigh the pros and cons in such a short time. At this time, Song Qingshu was no longer in the room. It turned out that he had wanted to come back and have a good time with Gu Bai, but she had tactfully rejected him, which made him feel as if there was a fire burning in his heart. He tossed and turned on the bed but couldn't fall asleep, so he simply sat up. Looking at the night sky outside the window, he could vaguely see the lights in the imperial palace. He couldn't help but have an idea. Today, Song Bai couldn't win, but Empress Pei Man was still there. When the idea arose in his mind, he couldn't hold it back anymore. He changed into the clothes of Xing State and used his lightness skill to rush toward the imperial palace in the dark. Chapter 8:16. Song Qing recognized the little eunuch. He was one of the two little eunuchs that Empress Pei Man often sent to summon him. After seeing his appearance, Song Qing couldn't help but laugh. He was just thinking about Pei Man, but she had the same idea as him. However, this could only be treated as a joke. Song Qing was very clear in his heart that a woman like Empress Pei Man pursued the beauty of power. She would never indulge in the love of a man and a woman. Since she sent someone to find him, it was estimated that her plan was about to start. At this moment, Song Qing was hiding in a big tree nearby. From his point of view, the little eunuch was knocking on the door outside, and the yellow-robed woman was hiding behind the door. She raised and lowered the sword in her hand. Obviously, she wanted to kill him. Noticing that the yellow-robed woman's eyes suddenly revealed a trace of killing intent, Song Qing was startled. He hurriedly leaped to her side and pressed down on her hand. What kind of joke was this? It was easy to kill a little eunuch, but after killing him, it would attract more trouble. The yellow-robed woman was startled by this sudden turn of events. Almost out of conditioned reflex, she used the 9-in white bone claw to grab at her side. Fortunately, Song Qing had suffered a few losses from her before and had already anticipated this move. He reached out and brushed her elbow. The yellow-robed woman felt her hands go numb and her hands immediately softened. She was shocked. When did the Jin Kingdom Imperial Palace have such a master? When she was about to fight back, she heard a familiar voice. "Don't make trouble, it's me." The yellow-robed woman looked back and saw Song Qing's hateful face close to her. She couldn't help but spit. "Let me go. Why are you holding me so tightly?" "It's an accident. I'm just worried that you will make too much noise." Song Qing loosened his hands and hurriedly tried to explain himself. "Humph, do you think I don't know your virtue? If you want to take advantage of me, just say it." The yellow-clothed woman became more and more annoyed as she spoke. She remembered that when she was roaming the Jianghu, everyone treated her as an honored guest. Not even the corner of her clothes had been touched by a man. But after she met Song Qing, she was stripped of her clothes and treated by him. She didn't know how many times she had suffered in secret. Song Qing laughed bitterly. Just as he was about to say something, the young eunuch's angry voice came from outside the door. "Little Xing, I heard your voice. If you don't agree, I'll go back and report to her ladyship. You won't be able to bear the consequences if her ladyship blames you." I'm coming. What are you rushing me for?" Song Qing responded and then shrugged at the yellow-robed woman, revealing a helpless expression. "I'll go deal with him first." Seeing him quickly put on the mask of little Xinghua and turn into another person in the blink of an eye, the yellow-robed woman opened her mouth slightly and said in surprise, "Your disguise is really wonderful. Do you have a lover or someone in your heart?" Song Qing suddenly turned around and smiled at her. "No, why do you ask?" The yellow-robed woman was puzzled. Did his question connect to what she had just said? Song Qing shook his head regretfully. "That's a pity. If you have a lover, I can reluctantly disguise myself as him to relieve your pain of lovesickness." Song Qing quickly finished speaking and opened the door to run out. The yellow-robed woman was startled. Worried that she would be seen by the people outside, she subconsciously hid in the shadows. Only then did she realize that Song Qing had done this on purpose. It was so that she couldn't get even with him. Watching him walk further and further away with the little eunuch, the yellow-robed woman couldn't help but chuckle. "This bastard is clearly a lord, but sometimes he's naughty like a child. Little Xing, it's not that I want to scold you, but in the entire imperial palace, if the empress summons us, not to mention us servants, even the imperial concubines have to immediately go and pay their respects. But you, every time, her ladyship has to personally send someone to invite you. Even after she does, you still look reluctant." On the way to the Hall of Peaceful Harmony, the little eunuch began to nag endlessly. Song Qing chuckled. "Brother, I just had an upset stomach and stayed in the latrine for a while. I thought of going to see the empress and couldn't possibly stink, so I went to change my clothes and wash my hands. That's why I was delayed." The little eunuch avoided his hand with a look of disgust. "You went to the latrine and still put it on me. Isn't it clean now?" Song Qing threw a small piece of gold to him. "If I offended you in any way, please forgive me, Gong Gong." "Gold?" The little eunuch unconsciously put it in his mouth and bit it. His expression instantly relaxed. "And people have 3 urgent needs. This is something that can't be helped. When her ladyship asks, this brother will help you smooth things over." "Many thanks, Gong Gong." Song Qing sneered inwardly. Just now, you disliked me for going to the latrine, but now you're sending gold to your mouth. You don't use your brain to think. Gold is yellow, feces is also yellow. If I really went to the toilet and rubbed some feces on it, wouldn't you eat it? That's right, Gong Gong. What does her ladyship want with me this time? This gold couldn't be spent for nothing. He had to get something out of his mouth so he could prepare. How can we servants guess at her ladyship's thoughts? The little eunuch said a dignified sentence, then suddenly changed the topic. He lowered his voice and said, Little Xing, don't blame this brother for not reminding you. In a moment, you have to serve her ladyship with 120% of your energy. I think her ladyship's mood isn't quite right today. All the eunuchs and palace maids in the palace have been driven out by her. If she comes to you at this time, I'm afraid, heh. The little eunuch didn't finish his sentence and gave him a you-know look. Song Qing secretly felt nauseated as he thought, this little eunuch's vision is too low. He only thinks that Empress Peiman is in a bad mood, but from what he said, Peiman has already begun to clear the place. Does she simply want to continue her former fate with me, or is her unknown plan about to be activated? When he thought of the passion of that night, Song Qing couldn't help but feel his mouth go dry. Old rules, go in by yourself. The little eunuch led him to the entrance of Taiha Palace Hall, and then turned to leave. With his previous experience, Song Qing walked in openly under the watchful eyes of the imperial bodyguards. As expected, the imperial bodyguards acted as if they were all blind, not even sparing him a glance. You've finally come. Empress Peiman's voice carried a trace of anger, but she quickly concealed it. It's good that you've come. Quickly come and see the new clothes this consort has prepared for you. See if they fit. Song Qing had a strange expression on his face. Although he had always been very confident in his skills, a woman like Empress Peiman couldn't wash away all her glory and make clothes for her man like a little married woman just because of a friendship. But when he saw what clothes the other had prepared for him, he immediately understood. My dog eyes must have been blind. Chapter 8:17. These are the new clothes that Nyang Nyang has prepared? Song Qinshu grimaced. At the same time, he had to feign the fear and trepidation that a little eunuch should have. He had originally thought that after that night, the Empress would see through his identity as a fake eunuch, but after so long she had not made a single move. Seeing him again today, her expression was the same, so he maintained his composure to deal with all changes. What, weren't you very daring last time? Are you scared now? Empress Peiman was smiling, but she was very depressed inside. Last time, if she hadn't gone too crazy with this little eunuch, causing her to lose her mind, she wouldn't have been taken advantage of by the mysterious man in the end. In this time, she had been secretly investigating who the man was that night, but she couldn't find any clues. In the end, in a fit of anger, she had executed all the suspects in her mind. Last time, it was because Nyang Nyang was too beautiful that this one couldn't control himself and forgot to be afraid. As Song Qinshu answered, he silently observed her expression. How could a eunuch like you not be able to control yourself? Peiman giggled. Little Xing, Ben Gong finds that I like you more and more. Your flattery methods are really original, and your mouth is as sweet as honey. Everything I said just now came from the bottom of my heart, the heavens and earth can bear witness. Song Qinshu spoke righteously. All right, you're starting to talk about literature with Ben Gong. I don't know where you learned this idiom. Empress Peiman was not interested in continuing on this topic with him. She pointed at the dragon robe at the side, quickly put it on for Ben Gong to see. Song Qinshu also wanted to know what she wanted to do, so he didn't refuse and quickly changed out of the eunuch's clothes. Seeing his strong chest and tall and sturdy figure, Empress Peiman's eyes lit up. She reached out and pressed on it. Oh, you're quite familiar with me. You must be very popular with the palace maids in the palace. Tell me, How many palace maids want to eat with you? Having stayed in the imperial palace for a long time, Song Qingshu knew that it was a lonely palace maid and a eunuch who fell in love with each other and became a fake couple. Although it was called a fake couple, in fact, other than the intimacy between husband and wife, it was no different from a real couple. Song Qingshu did not want to cause more trouble, so he shook his head and said, "This lowly one is favored by her ladyship, so how would I dare to find other palace maids to eat?" This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. "You dog servant, you've got guts," Empress Peiman scolded with a smile. "You've been treating Ben Gong as a food target for half a day." "I don't dare." In the past, when Song Qingshu was disguised as Kangxi, he often wore dragon robes, so very quickly he changed into new clothes. A hint of surprise flashed through Empress Peiman's eyes, and then she looked at him suspiciously. "You're quite familiar with wearing the dragon robe, huh?" Song Qingshu's heart trembled, but he replied without batting an eyelid, "Your ladyship, have you forgotten that I am the head steward of the Imperial Clothing Bureau? I'm quite familiar with the service in the palace." "So that's how it is?" Empress Peiman had just casually asked, but her attention was quickly attracted by the valiant man in front of her. She couldn't help but click her tongue in wonder. "I didn't think that a dog servant like you would look so decent after wearing the dragon robe, compared to the real emperor." She originally wanted to say that he looked more like the emperor than the real emperor, but she quickly realized that it would be terrible if these words were leaked, so she kept her mouth shut. When Song Qingshu heard her say dog servant again and again, he couldn't help feeling angry inside. Who was it that was lying there like a bitch that night? Seeing Song Qingshu put on the dragon robe, Peiman's face showed a satisfied expression. "Not bad, not bad. The effect is better than Ben Gong had expected." "Shao Xing, do you still remember the etiquette Ben Gong taught you before?" "I don't dare forget for a moment." Song Qingshu thought, "It's here." She had planned for so long. He finally knew what she wanted to do. "That's good." Empress Peiman's face suddenly heated up. "Just do as you did last time." Last time, this little eunuch had suddenly exuded a domineering aura that was still fresh in her memory. It had to be known that as the master of the Hogong, what kind of scene had she not seen? He had just casually glanced at her and she was so scared that she didn't dare to stand up. Now, Song Qingshu was confused. Did she want to play that fake phoenix and fake phoenix game with me again? In a while, the Empress' breathing suddenly became hurried, clearly not as calm as she appeared. "In a while, 2 people will come here. Pretend to be the current emperor." Song Qingshu felt strange. Didn't he need to change his appearance? His current appearance was the same as Jin's. "I'm afraid there's a huge difference between the emperors of the 2 countries. I wonder who the 2 people will be so I can prepare in advance." Song Qingshu asked tentatively. Empress Peiman smiled. "Don't be so nervous, it definitely won't be some minister marshal. If it was that complicated, Ben Gong wouldn't dare let you pretend. It's just 2 little palace maids that don't understand anything. They have never seen the emperor. You just have to act according to what Ben Gong usually teaches you. They won't be able to tell." 2 little palace maids? Song Qingshu felt even more strange. This Empress Peiman, as the master of the Hogong, had to spend so much effort to deal with 2 little palace maids. There was definitely a problem. Other than pretending to be the emperor, is there anything else I need to do? Song Qingshu believed that the matter was not so simple. Peiman did so much not just to deceive little palace maids. "Of course there is something for you to do." Noticing the worry in the other's eyes, Peiman smiled and said, "Don't frown, this is actually a good thing." "Good thing?" Song Qingshu stilled. "Yes, a good thing." The smile on Empress Peiman's face suddenly turned cold. "These 2 little palace maids think that they are here to serve the emperor in bed today. So when the time comes, Ben Gong doesn't care if you use your hands or tools, you must break their bodies." Song Qingshu was struck by lightning. He had speculated many possibilities, but he had never thought that Empress Pei Man's order would be so nonsensical. Also, zombies, break the bodies of 2 little palace maids? What the hell was going on? How is it, this job isn't bad, right? Seeing Song Qinshu stunned, Empress Pei Man thought that he was happy. How many men can't ask for this? I didn't think that a little eunuch like you would get it. Don't worry, Ben Gong won't treat you unfairly. These 2 little palace maids are both outstanding beauties, they are 1 in a million. Listening to Empress Pei Man's tone, it seems that she still thinks that I'm a eunuch. Could it be that she still hasn't reacted after that night? Song Qinshu was confused, but his attention quickly returned to the matter at hand. Your sister, whether the little palace maids are beautiful or not, it's not the key. The key is what does this Empress Pei Man want? Chapter 8:18. Song Qinshu couldn't help but go crazy. After all, this task was too unbelievable. What was Empress Pei Man trying to do? Could it be that the harem is fighting for favor? She saw that the 2 little palace maids were too beautiful and was worried that the real emperor would see them and fall in love with them, causing her to fall out of favor, so she found someone to break their bodies and make them lose the qualifications to be favored? This was the first thought that appeared in Song Qinshu's mind, but he quickly rejected it. Everyone knew that Jin Shizong and Empress Pei Man didn't get along. Pei Man had already fallen out of favor. What's more, her actions were too bad. If Jin Shizong found out, she might not even be able to keep her position as empress. What are you standing there for? Could it be that you're too excited about being a man? When Empress Pei Man said the word man, her voice was filled with ridicule. I'm indeed very excited. I thought it would be a very difficult task, but I didn't think it would be this easy. Song Qinshu already had an idea. Since he didn't have enough information, he might as well not think about it. He would wait and see. Of course it's easy for a man, but for you. Empress Pei Man's gaze fell between his legs. With a light laugh, she handed an object over. If you can't do it later, use this to help you. Song Qinshu took it and looked. Wasn't this the thing that Empress Pei Man had used to solve his problem? This woman doesn't think it's dirty. Can this kind of thing be used indiscriminately? Song Qinshu secretly felt disdain, but since Pei Man didn't find out that he was a fake eunuch, he was happy to continue pretending, so he took the thing. It's about time, they should be here soon. Try to speak as little as possible to avoid revealing anything. This consort will look after you from the side. Empress Pei Man was still worried and reminded him. Song Qinshu had just nodded when a commotion came from outside. Soon, 2 young girls dressed in palace attire leisurely walked in. When they saw Song Qinshu sitting in the seat of honor, dressed in a dragon robe, the 2 girls secretly looked at each other and then knelt down. These servants greet your majesty. Long live your majesty. Greetings to the empress. Long live the empress. Raise your head and let us see. Song Qinshu was indeed very curious. Just who were these 2 little palace maids that Empress Pei Man would go to such lengths to deal with them? Empress Pei Man, who was sitting below, glanced at him in surprise. It wasn't that Song Qinshu had revealed any flaws. On the contrary, his acting was too good. That calm and unhurried tone of command was exactly the same as the real emperor's. No, the real one's aura was a bit lacking. Empress Pei Man was somewhat glad that she had chosen this little eunuch to carry out the plan, but at the same time she was secretly vigilant. This little eunuch's ability to imitate was too good. If she had not known beforehand that he was a fake, she might have been deceived by him. Such a person must not be allowed to live. Hearing Song Qinshu's words, the 2 little palace maids answered shyly and then raised their heads. Yes. When Song Qinshu heard their delicate and tender voices, his first impression of them was greatly enhanced. When the 2 women raised their heads, he also clearly saw their appearance. 2 snow-white faces. It wasn't known if it was because of fear or shyness, but there was a faint blush on their cheek. adding on their curved eyebrows and small mouths, they were truly bright and beautiful. The two women were about 14 or 15 years old. Their faces were somewhat similar. If there was no accident, they should be a pair of sisters. The two sisters were both beauties. They timidly leaned against each other, adding to each other's beauty. The more one looked at them, the more beautiful they became. However, what surprised Song Qinshu even more was that he had seen these two young girls before. They had been taken to Jiaotai Hall by the yellow-clothed woman. The two of them had hidden on the beam and seen the two beautiful little palace maids beside Empress Pei Man. Later on, the Prince of Wei had even coveted them. "Aren't they people from Pei Man's palace?" Song Qingshu's heart trembled. Could it be that Pei Man had deliberately sent them to test me to see if I had the ability to carry out her final plan? Song Qingshu suddenly understood. After all this time, today was only a preliminary competition. Only by passing would one be qualified to accept the real task. "What are your names?" Song Qingshu thought that since this was the case, then this great master would accompany them in putting on a good show. "This servant is Zhao Hu, or this servant is Zhao Yuan Yuan. Yuan Yuan, which Yuan Yuan?" Song Qingshu thought in his heart. In ancient times there was Chun Yuan Yuan, and in later generations there was Gao Yuan Yuan. By chance, he had seen both of them. They were all peerless beauties. This little girl was called Yuan Yuan. Just from the name alone, she had a few more colors. "Replying to your majesty, this servant's name is taken from Songs of Chu. My heart is filled with sorrow, and I don't know what it is," the little palace maid replied. Hearing this, Song Qingshu felt a headache. It was as if he was listening to a heavenly book. The only thing he could be sure of was that this yuan was not the yuan of Gao Yuan Yuan. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. "What does this sentence mean?" Song Qingshu casually asked. In any case, he was pretending to be Jin Shizong, the emperor of Jurchen. In addition, he had never been known for his literary talent. Presumably, they were not much different from each other. They definitely wouldn't understand such genteel words, so he didn't worry about exposing himself. The little palace maid's small mouth opened slightly. Just as she was about to answer, the little palace maid called Zhao, who were next to her, quietly tugged at the hem of her dress. Zhao Yuan Yuan suddenly came to her senses, and her expression couldn't help but change. Although the two's movements were secretive, Song Qingshu saw it clearly. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Why aren't you speaking?" "This servant doesn't dare to speak." Zhao Yuan Yuan's pretty face became pale. Obviously, she was somewhat annoyed that she had said too much. "Speak, we will forgive you." Song Qingshu picked up the tea on the table and leisurely took a sip. Empress Pei Man, who was next to him, was even more surprised. His gestures were completely royal. Just now, when the two sides asked and answered, she actually couldn't get a word in edgewise. Was this person really just a little eunuch? The little palace maid called Zhao Yuanyuan bit her lips and finally answered in a low voice. "This sentence means lingering in the heart, reluctant to part, and infinite sorrow, vague and indistinct, not knowing where to stay." Before Song Qingshu could react, Empress Pei Man was the first to explode in anger. "What a good name! What a good name! What a good name for not knowing where to go! Your mother gave you this name because she missed her homeland and was disrespectful to our great Jean. Humph, could it be that you've forgotten the lesson of that empressly? Please forgive us, Your Highness, please forgive us." The two little palace maids' beautiful faces turned pale. They hurriedly kowtowed and begged for forgiveness. Hearing this, Song Qingshu was speechless. He cursed in his heart, "Motherf *cur, you ancient people always speak in a roundabout way and like to quote classics. If I didn't happen to know this story, wouldn't I be confused?" When the southern Tang dynasty was destroyed by the northern Song dynasty, the last Emperor Li Yu and Empress Zhou surrendered to the northern Song dynasty together. Because Zhao Guangyi, the lecher, had summoned Empress Zhou to the palace to have fun, Li Yu had no choice but to be cuckolded. His depression could not be vented, so he finally wrote the peerless famous poem, "Ask the Emperor how much worry can he have, just like a river flowing eastward in spring." But because of this poem, Zhao Guangyi thought that he missed his homeland and was restless, so he immediately gave him the traction poison. And the names of the two little girls in front of him clearly revealed their longing for their homeland and their fear of the current situation. It was very similar to Empress Li in the past. Zhao Huan or Zhao Yunyuan, both of them have the surname Zhao. Song Qingshu's expression changed. He had thought it was a little strange before. The naming style of these two little palace maids and the cultured manners they displayed were definitely not something common palace maids would have. It was only when Pei Man suddenly lost her temper, and even used Li Hozhu's misfortune to threaten them, that he finally reacted. These two little girls had such outstanding appearances and extraordinary manners of speech. They were probably the princesses of the Song dynasty in the laundry yard. It was no wonder that when the yellow-robed girl saw them being molested by the Prince of Wei, she had recklessly rushed out. If the northern Song dynasty still existed, they should still be high and mighty princesses, right? Looking at the two little palace maids kneeling on the ground trembling, Song Qingshu was filled with emotion. He could not help but marvel at the magic of fate. Zhao Guangyi humiliated Empress Li in that way. How could he expect that 100 years later, his descendants would also suffer the same fate? Seeing that Empress Pei Man was still reprimanding the two girls, Song Qingshu coughed and said, all right. We have already said that they are innocent. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your mercy." The two little palace maids hurriedly kowtowed in thanks as if they had been pardoned. Pei Man looked at Song Qingshu as if she had seen a ghost. His tone just now was exactly the same as Shizong's back then. "Humph, this dog servant is addicted to pretending to be the emperor. I'll let you be happy for now. Once this Empress plan is completed, I'll slowly take care of you. Since His Majesty has spoken, this Empress will not pursue this matter any further. As long as the two of you serve His Majesty well, who knows, one day when His Majesty is happy, he might issue an edict to pardon your sisters. They won't have to suffer the hardships of prostitution." Empress Pei Man looked at the two little palace maids as she spoke. Song Qingshu frowned slightly. From Empress Pei Man's tone, it seemed that she was using the older sisters in the laundry yard to threaten these two little maids so that they would willingly serve the emperor. Seeing the two little maids' willing expressions and the determination to sacrifice themselves in their eyes, Song Qingshu couldn't help but smile bitterly. They were truly naive. Even after being sold, they were still counting the money for someone else. They didn't even realize that the person they saw tonight wasn't the emperor at all. Empress Pei Man was also very satisfied with the two girls' reactions. Her gaze fell on their clothes and she said, "Someone should have helped you bathe just now, right?" The two little maids' faces turned slightly red as they replied in unison, "We've already bathed, that's good. Now take off your outer robes." Empress Pei Man's words almost made Song Qingshu spit out the tea in his mouth. Song Qingshu had been focused on guessing Empress Pei Man's plan. It was only now that he noticed that the two little palace maids weren't wearing normal palace maid clothes. Instead, they were wearing— how should he put it, they were wearing hot spring kimonos from his previous life. Chapter 8:19. The two women's skin was as smooth as satin. Their robes slid to the ground without any obstruction, revealing their dazzling white bodies. Song Qingshu's eyebrows jumped. The women of the imperial palace, taking off their clothes at the slightest disagreement. "Should I close my eyes or not?" "Your bodies have taken good care of," Empress Pei Man nodded with satisfaction. "These years, the laundry yard steward has never had you do any rough work. Do you know why?" "Newbie does not know." The two little princesses answered shyly. They exchanged glances and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. These years, their older sisters had suffered a lot, but the two of them still received good food and drink. Even though it could not compare to the treatment of a real princess, it was not much different from the treatment of a normal family's young miss. The reason why you have not been made to do rough work is because we are worried that calluses will form on your hands and your skin will become rough from the erosion of wind and frost, Payman suddenly sneered. And all this is not because of your previous status as princesses, but because you are the youngest in the laundry yard. When the Jin army conquered Bienliang, you too were still in swaddling clothes, so you were able to preserve your chastity. Once you grow older and become more and more beautiful, the palace will decide to let you fill His Majesty's harem, so all of this is a gift from His Majesty. From now on, you must serve His Majesty well, understand? Song Qingshu glanced at Payman and thought to himself that this woman's acting skills were pretty good. She acted as if she was a concubine for her husband. Not to mention these two naive little girls, even someone as experienced as Zhao Fujin would be deceived by her. Newbie understands. The two young girls knew that from the beginning, they were destined to be the favored concubines of the Jin Emperor. They couldn't help but pale. Even though they were young when Bienliang was conquered, they often heard their older sisters talk about the past in the laundry yard and knew that they were also of noble birth. But now, the cold reality forced them to accept their fate. Don't kneel, come and serve the emperor with wine. Payman secretly gave Song Qingshu a look, telling him to act according to plan. Song Qingshu was speechless. The current situation was unimaginable. Was it better for him to be a maid or a beast? But he was more concerned about Payman. The queen did not seem to want to leave. Did she want to watch the whole process? Yes. The two little princesses got up when they heard that. It was obvious that they were not used to being naked. Their two slightly immature faces were covered with a blush. They shyly came to Song Qingshu and knelt down next to him. One of them poured wine, and the other raised the wine glass to Song Qingshu. Your Majesty, please drink. The young girl's voice was soft and gentle, making Song Qingshu's heart go numb. He thought that if the yellow-robed woman saw the current situation, she would probably take a sword and chop him to death. But this time, I'm really wronged. I didn't want this to happen. Song Qingshu took the wine glass. It was as if he could smell the faint fragrance of virgins coming from beside him. His heart couldn't help but sway, but he was not a rookie. He quickly gathered his thoughts. Although this lord is greedy and lustful, I also cherish and love flowers. I didn't know these two girls before. If I push the boat with the current like this, what difference is there between me and a beast? What's more, they are the yellow-robed woman's younger sisters. Although I don't get along with that woman, but Song Qingshu secretly despised himself. He was clearly not willing to only obtain the other's body. He wanted to obtain both body and mind, so he decided to cast a long line to catch a big fish. Why did he have to say it in such a dignified manner? Cough, cough. Song Qingshu pretended to cough twice and then waved his hand at Empress Payman. Empress, you can withdraw first. It's enough for the two of them to serve here. Empress Payman was so angry that smoke almost came out of her 7 orifices. Did this dog servant really think this was his home? He didn't even look at where this was. This was her own sleeping palace, Taiha Palace. Where could she withdraw to? But anger was anger. When she thought of her own plan, she could only suppress her anger. Then this concubine will not disturb your Majesty. This concubine will wait in the side hall. If your Majesty needs anything, please summon this concubine at any time. I know. Song Qingshu impatiently waved his hand. Seeing this, Empress Payman cursed in her heart. This dog servant, after tonight, this concubine will let you know what it means to be unable to live and unable to die. Seeing the unwillingness in Empress Payman's eyes as she left, Song Qingshu chuckled. In fact, there was no need to be polite to her now. As long as he knew her final plan, it would be time for both sides to lay their cards on the table. Sensing Empress Payman's aura, Song Qingshu could not help but frown when he sensed that Empress Payman had not gone far, but was hiding outside the wall and eavesdropping. He was about to order her to leave, but he immediately realized that this matter was of great importance to Pei Man. She would definitely be paying attention to the development of the matter at all times. If he forced her to leave, it would be counterproductive. The key point was that he didn't know what Pei Man's goal was. If she said that she was just worried that these two beauties would compete with her for favor in the future, he definitely wouldn't believe it. But if it wasn't for the sake of competing for favor, then why did she want to ruin the bodies of these two girls? He didn't know Pei Man's final plan, so he didn't want to force the other side to turn hostile so quickly. He pretended not to know that she was outside the wall and casually lifted the chin of one of the maids. With a faint smile, he asked, "Are you Hooer or Yuan?" The young girl's heart jumped when she saw the look in his eyes. She quickly replied, "I am Yuan. That's a good name. Let's drink." After saying this, Song Qingshu picked up a wine cup and poured it into her mouth. Cough, cough, the young girl didn't react for a moment and choked. The sparkling wine stain slid down the corner of her mouth to her smooth neck. Under the light, it looked particularly crystal clear. Song Qingshu didn't know whether it was the light in the room that illuminated her skin or her skin that illuminated the room. Seeing her choking, Song Qing laughed and pulled Zhao Hooer closer. This name is also very good. I also want to drink." Seeing everything through the window, Empress Pei Man's expression could be said to be very interesting. This unrestrained appearance was not like that of a little eunuch who was usually submissive. It was clearly the appearance of an absurd emperor. Could it be that he knew that he couldn't escape death, so he simply did as he pleased? Empress Pei Man thought about it and could only come up with this explanation. Then she felt relieved. Well, this dog slave helped me to complete the task. What's wrong with letting him enjoy it before he dies? Song Qingshu guessed that Empress Pei Man had already been deceived by him. Therefore, with one in each hand, he embraced the two little princesses of the Song dynasty and walked toward the phoenix couch. As he walked, he laughed presumptuously and said, "Little beauties, Zhen will love you two very well later." Chapter 820. Hearing that Song Qingshu deliberately emphasized the word love, Empress Pei Man curled her lips disdainfully. He's just a eunuch. What a boastful boast. Even if you want to love them, you can't, right? If he uses the thing I gave him, he might be able to. Thinking of the size of that thing, a strange smile appeared on Empress Pei Man's face. When the time comes, these two inexperienced girls will only be left with pain. Of course, Empress Pei Man wasn't worried about the two girls inside. She just wanted them to be in more pain. That way, they would scream louder, and she would be able to go in and arrange everything in time, so that she wouldn't have to starve outside. Song Qingshu held the two girls to the phoenix couch and put down all the curtains around them. The frivolous smile on his face disappeared instantly and was replaced by a solemn expression. The two girls' hearts were originally beating wildly, feeling shy and embarrassed. Suddenly seeing him change his temperament, they couldn't help but stare blankly. Long story short, I'll ask you two questions first. Answer me quietly. Song Qingshu lowered his voice. Yes, Your Majesty. The two girls thought that he was the emperor of the Jin kingdom and thought that they had made him unhappy, so they answered in fear. Song Qingshu instantly noticed their thoughts, but he didn't expose them. This was beneficial to his question. Do you know a woman named Zhao Fujin? The two girls hesitated for a moment and answered subconsciously, She is our fifth sister. Did she offend Your Majesty in any way? For the sake of us, Your Majesty, please don't make things difficult for her. Seeing their nervous faces, Song Qingshu couldn't help laughing. He didn't explain and continued to ask, What's the name of your 19th sister? 19th sister? The two girls looked at each other, and there was a blank look in their eyes. After a while, Zhao Huaner said, I seem to have heard 5th sister mention that 19th sister was rescued by a mysterious person when she was being escorted. Her name. At that time, sister mentioned it, but it's been too long, I can't remember. You can't remember? Song Qinshu furrowed his brows. He couldn't help but be worried. Although the yellow-robed woman's reaction last time had made everything clear, he was now in the imperial palace with danger at every step. He couldn't make the slightest mistake. If these two girls were fake goods that Empress Payman had found, then it would be terrible. That was why he needed to confirm their identities. I remember now. Zhao Yuanyuan suddenly cheered up. I was there too. 19th sister's name seems to be you. You what? Ying Luo. With this reminder, Zhao Huan finally remembered. After confirming the identity of the two women, Song Qinshu secretly breathed a sigh of relief and quickly said to them, "Listen, I'm a friend of your 5th sister and 19th sister. This time, I'm here to save you and your sister, friend?" The two girls were shocked. "Aren't you the emperor?" It was no wonder that their brains couldn't react. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't understand how the emperor of the Jin kingdom could be a friend of their 5th sister and 19th sister. Why would he save them? Of course, I'm not the emperor. It's a long story. In general, the empress wanted to find someone to destroy your chastity, and I found a way to gain her trust. She sent me to carry out this task. Song Qinshu quickly said. The two girls blinked and finally understood. They subconsciously opened their mouths and were about to scream. Song Qinshu reacted quickly and immediately covered their mouth. The screams that were about to ring through the night sky turned into whimpers. He secretly cursed in his heart. Fortunately, there are such scenes in the TV series. Otherwise, I would have been killed by you two girls. You are princesses of a kingdom, not village women. Can't you tell whether you should scream or not at this time? Song Qinshu's tone was extremely impolite. If you understand, then blink your eyes and I will let go of your hands. But let me warn you first. If you still scream, I will not recognize you. Seeing the eyes of the two girls blinking like the stars in the sky, with pitiful expressions on their faces, Song Qinshu's anger immediately dissipated. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Humans are really visual creatures. When they encounter good-looking things, they are much more tolerant. After letting go of their mouths, the two girls didn't scream, but they subconsciously grabbed the brocade quilt beside them and hurriedly covered their exposed bodies. Song Qinshu sneered. I didn't see you like this when facing the emperor of the Jin kingdom. Now that you know I'm your friend, you become reserved? Although he sympathized with these women who had lost their country and their families, there must be something hateful about these pitiful people. Back then, thousands of these concubines and princesses were captured. But in the face of the Jin's humiliation, only a few of them had the courage to end their lives. The rest were willing to be humiliated by the Jin soldiers in order to drag out an ignoble existence. Thinking of the stone tablet of Jinkong's chastity in the palace, Song Qinshu became angrier. He directly reached out and pulled down the quilt in front of them. Why do you still want to cover up now? Anyway, you've seen it all. The emperor of the Jin kingdom can see it, but the Han people can't see it. The eyes of the two girls suddenly turned red. Hero, you misunderstood. The reason why we were willing to serve the emperor of the Jin kingdom was that we wanted to please him and pardon our sisters. They are about to be sent to the brothel outside to receive guests, so we. Song Qinshu looked embarrassed. He also knew that the princess of the Song dynasty was sent to the brothel. That was how Zhao Fujin was sent before. Forget it. If you want to cover up, just cover up. But don't wear clothes for the time being. Empress Payman will come to check later. Song Qinshu threw the quilt on the bed on the two girls. The two girls tightened their bodies in the quilt and asked with red faces, "May I ask what is the relationship between you and Sister Yashuang? Why did you take such a big risk to save us?" Although they were naive and pure, they were not stupid. Zhao Fujin, the fifth sister, had been in the laundry yard all these years. How could she have had the chance to make any friends? The only possibility left was the 19th sister who had been saved by the mysterious man. Although Song Qingshu said that he was here to save them, everything was too unbelievable. Over the years, they had learned not to trust anyone so easily. Therefore, it was necessary to test him. Unfortunately, they had not experienced any real hardship. What they were thinking was written all over their faces. Seeing the doubt in their hearts, Song Qingshu opened his mouth and replied, "I am your 19th brother-in-law. Ingluo pestered me every day to come and save you. I was so annoyed that I could only agree." The reason why he did this was to establish a relationship of trust with the two girls as soon as possible. Empress Pei Man had been listening outside the hall. It was obvious that they did not have much time left. 19th brother-in-law? The two girls looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. However, they quickly thought of something and couldn't help but blush. "Since you are our brother-in-law, you shouldn't have looked at us just now, my two ladies. Your concerns are very problematic. Is this the time to discuss these things?" Song Qingshu was about to go crazy. "What does it matter if I looked at you? It's not like you will lose a piece of flesh. Besides, compared to being looked at by brother-in-law, it's better to keep the goodies within the family. Do you want to be looked at by the Emperor of the Jin Kingdom?" "Of course not," the two girls replied in unison. However, they quickly realized that it seemed that they were willing to be looked at by Song Qingshu. For a moment they didn't know how to explain and their faces turned red. Forget it. Let's not talk about these useless things," Song Qingshu quickly said. "Since Empress Pei Man sent me to harm your bodies, she will definitely come in later to check, so we have to deal with her." The two girls looked at each other. Zhao Huan mumbled, "Brother-in-law, why do I feel that you are thinking of ways to take advantage of us?" Song Qingshu sneered, "Humph, if I wanted to take advantage of you, do I need to go through so much trouble? If I didn't do anything just now, you would have taken the initiative to throw yourself into my arms." "I'm sorry, brother-in-law. We misunderstood you," Zhao Yuan said apologetically. "Anyway, we decided to sacrifice ourselves to save our other sisters. Rather than giving ourselves to the Emperor of the Jin Kingdom, it's better to give ourselves to you. You come on." Looking at her stretching her neck, as if she was ready to be plucked, Song Qingshu almost had a nosebleed. He couldn't help but say gloomily, "Can you stop thinking so much? I just want to hide it from Empress Pei Man. When did I ever take advantage of you?" Zhao Yuan's cheeks turned red and she immediately shrank her head under the quilt. Zhao Huan, who was next to him, tried to hold back her laughter. She pursed her lips and asked, "Brother-in-law, what should we do?" "In fact, it's very simple." Song Qingshu cleared his throat and said, "When she checks later, she won't be able to open your legs to check." His words made the two girls spit in unison. "What she's checking for is just your fallen petals. Something like a fallen petals is simply too easy to fake. When the time comes, all you have to do is pretend to be raped and scream a few times. Empress Pei Man is limited by her mindset and won't suspect anything. Thanks to all the melodramatic TV series in his previous life, this kind of lousy idea could be easily made." "That?" Zhao Huan raised her hand timidly. How can I fake a bleeding?" Song Qingshu couldn't help but be dumbfounded. "Do you have to be so innocent? Do you need me to teach you this kind of thing?" "I really don't know," Zhao Huan pouted and looked extremely wronged. At this time, Zhao Yuan also poked her head out of the quilt. Song Qingshu looked at her and said, "You don't know either." Chapter 8:21. The two girls looked at each other. No matter how they listened, they felt that this mysterious brother-in-law was strange. However, at this point, they had no other choice but to blink their eyes and look at the man in front of them. Song Qing didn't expect that he would actually travel back to ancient times and give the little girl a physiological lesson. After thinking about the wording, he said, "In fact, it is very easy to fake this thing. Empress Payman has already put white silk on the bed. You just need to get some blood on it." "This blood, how do I do it?" The little girl's face turned red. In her mind, she had to maintain her virginity and get blood. How could this be possible? No. Song Qing looked at the two girls in front of him as if they were aliens. Why were they so cute? Seeing that the two girls were really at a loss, he had to say gloomily, "Give me your hand." The two girls hesitated for a long time before they slowly stretched out their hands. Song Qing was too lazy to talk nonsense with them. He grabbed the two girls' hands and instantly pierced their fingers with invisible sword energy. Ah, the tingling pain on their fingertips made the two girls exclaim at the same time. The two girls subconsciously wanted to take their hands back, but Song Qing didn't have the slightest intention of showing mercy. He grabbed the two girls' hands and didn't let go. The blood oozing from his fingers dripped on the white silk until two red flowers appeared on it. Only then did he nod with satisfaction. At this time, the two girls were already in tears from the pain. Song Qing secretly sighed. "Aloli is good, but isn't she a little too delicate?" Because the three deliberately lowered their voices, Empress Payman outside the door couldn't hear the sound in the room for a long time. She was a little impatient when she suddenly heard the two girls' screams. She couldn't help but be overjoyed. "It's done." But what made her a little puzzled was why the two of them made their voices at the same time. This thought flashed in Empress Payman's mind, and she didn't pay too much attention to it. Being in the top position for a long time made her develop a habit. She only needed to pay attention to the results, and the process would naturally be completed by the people below her. Maybe that dog slave Xioxingguo was smart enough, or maybe he used both hands, but who would care about these details? Song Qing was about to call Empress Payman into check, but when he saw the two girls' smooth jade-like skin, he couldn't help but frown. "This is still not enough, your bodies are too clean." "Clean, isn't it good?" Zhao Huan asked blankly. "Please, First Miss, please use your brains and think about it. You are pretending that you have just been pampered by the Jin Kingdom's emperor. How can there be no traces of disheveled clothes on your body?" Song Qing hesitated for a moment before continuing. "How about this? You guys pinch each other's bodies. The more red marks and bruises you make, the better." After listening to his explanation, the two girls roughly understood and began to pinch each other's exposed skin according to his instructions. Song Qing took a few glances and shook his head. "It's too light. You won't be able to leave a mark like this. Excuse me." After that, without waiting for them to react, his hands flew up and down, quickly pressing on their bodies. The two women cried out in alarm, but the effect was immediate. All kinds of signs of abuse gradually appeared on their bodies. "Brother-in-law, it hurts," the two girls cried pitifully with tears in their eyes. Song Qing was speechless. "Don't use such misleading words, okay? If it doesn't hurt, you can't hide it." As soon as he finished speaking, Empress Payman's voice came from the door. "Your Majesty, it's getting late. You still have to go back to read the memorials." Song Qing knew that she was urging him in a disguised way, so he pretended to be impatient and said, "I know what I'm doing." Then he lowered his voice and quickly told the two girls some things to pay attention to. "Your Majesty, you have the body of the Jin Kingdom and are related to thousands of people. You must not indulge in wine and women." Empress Payman's voice gradually became stern. Song Qing knew that she was already impatient. Anyway, he had already told her what needed to be said, so he replied, Okay, I'll be right out." He turned back to the two girls and said, "I'll leave first. Take care. Brother-in-law, take care too." The eyes of the two girls were filled with reluctance. Although they had always felt that he had other intentions, compared to the fiendish demons of the Jin Kingdom, this mysterious brother-in-law made them feel much more at ease. Seeing Song Qing slowly come out, Empress Pei Man glared at him fiercely and then quickly rushed into the curtain. Suddenly, the cries of the girls came from inside. After a while, Empress Pei Man came out with a satisfied expression and quietly said, "Little Xing, you did well. Thank you for your praise, Your Highness." Song Qing asked tentatively, "Is there anything else that Your Highness wants me to do?" "No need, change your clothes first." Empress Pei Man secretly sneered. "I didn't treat you unfairly. Tonight, I let you, a little eunuch, enjoy the pleasures of the world. The other party is even a princess with golden branches and jade leaves. No matter how you look at it, your life is worth it. So, obediently die later." Song Qing was secretly disappointed. It seemed that Empress Pei Man's subsequent plans did not need Little Xing's participation at all. As he changed his clothes, he thought that he could quietly stay in the Hall of Peaceful Harmony later. In that way, all her plans would be clear. After Song Qing changed his clothes, Empress Pei Man led him out from the side door, and then waved to the shadow. "Come on, send Little Xing out." "Yes." A man dressed as a guard flashed out with a lantern and said to Song Qing expressionlessly, "Eunuch Xing, this way please." Song Qing's pupils shrank slightly. Although this man was not handsome, his steps were light and his breathing was even. Obviously, he was a master. He couldn't help but secretly sigh. No wonder so many people yearned for power. With power, there would be money and beauties. Even such a master could be ordered at will. Song Qing had been silently following the man. Noticing that they were going more and more remote, he understood and deliberately said, "Brother guard, have we gone the wrong way?" "No, this road is shorter." The guard replied coldly without turning his head. "Closer to the road to the underworld?" Song Qing secretly sneered. Empress Pei Man asked him to pretend to be the emperor. How could she tolerate him living in this world? All this was within his expectation, but he didn't expect that Empress Pei Man would act so quickly. A day as husband and wife means endless love. This woman is really amazing when she is ruthless. Song Qing secretly smiled bitterly. However, he didn't know that in Empress Pei Man's heart, he had always been a little eunuch. He thought that it was someone else that night. The guard walking in front suddenly stopped. Song Qing pretended not to know and asked, "Why don't you go?" "Because we have arrived." The guard said coldly. "Brother guard, you must be joking. There is still a distance from my residence." Song Qing looked frightened, but he was secretly alert. Chapter 8:22. Even though he was already prepared, Song Qingshu was still shocked by this ruthless blade. He could keenly feel that this blade carried an incomparably mournful and dense killing intent. It was unknown how many people had been killed to develop this kind of aura. If he was attacked by this strike without any preparation, he was not sure if he could dodge it. With a tap of his toes, he retreated several feet. Looking at the gash on his chest caused by the saber chi, Song Qingshu sighed with emotion. There are really hidden dragons and crouching tigers in this world. I didn't expect a nameless guard in the palace of the Jin Kingdom to have such skills. If Your Excellency were to make a living in Jianghu, you would definitely become famous. Isn't that better than being a servant in the palace? Compared to Song Qingshu, the guard was obviously more surprised. He did not expect that his successful strike could be dodged by this little eunuch. He reacted quickly and said in a deep voice, "You are not Little Xing. Who are you?" "Just like you, nameless." In his previous life, Song Qingshu had seen all kinds of villains die because they talked too much. Although he did not consider himself a villain, he still agreed with the principle of not getting carried away. "No matter who you are, you will die tonight." The guard did not talk nonsense. He waved his saber and slashed at Song Qingshu. Feeling that the death chi on this person's saber was too strong, Song Qingshu did not dare to be careless. He used his fingers to catch it. His whole body became blurred. The guard slashed 13 times in a row, but his clothes were not even touched. The guard was secretly surprised. It should be known that his saber technique was very strange. Each of the 13 strikes was stronger than the previous one. Every time he waved his saber, the momentum would increase. When the 13th strike came, it could be said to be invincible. Over the past few decades, he had relied on this set of saber techniques to kill countless people. There had been many experts whose martial arts were above his. In his opinion, those experts in Jianghu had a problem, and that was that they cared too much about their reputation and face. Because of their conceit, those experts insisted on taking his saber technique head-on, and in the end they were defeated and killed. But this little eunuch in front of him seemed to be able to predict the future, and did not take his saber technique at all. The 13 strikes in a row all hit nothing but air. Instead, the guard was hurt by the saber chi and suffered internal injuries. Knowing that he could not kill this mysterious eunuch, the guard was very decisive. He jumped and ran into the darkness. Song Qingshu was stunned. A moment ago, this person was obviously going to kill the heavens, but the next moment, he turned around and ran away. The change was too fast. Just as he was about to chase after him, he suddenly realized something. He retracted his foot and quietly watched the man's back as he escaped. The imperial bodyguard was originally afraid of his qinggong, but seeing that he did not pursue, he could not help but be overjoyed. But at this moment an extremely cold and gloomy wind suddenly came from the side. The wind was so fast that he could not avoid it. Worried that he would be entangled by this person and cause Song Qingshu to catch up, he did not want to stay. In a hurry, he waved his saber, intending to use the impact of the collision with the other's weapon to escape. But the expected impact did not come. Instead, he felt a sharp pain in his wrist. He looked back in horror and found that there were 5 bloody holes on his wrist. His gaze quickly moved upwards, only to see a beautiful woman with a face so pale that it was devoid of blood. Is she a ghost or an immortal? This was the last thought in the guard's life. The yellow-robed woman dealt with the escaping guard and walked towards Song Qingshu with her clothes fluttering in the wind. She had a faint smile on her face. It is rumored that the Golden Snake King's martial arts are matchless. But seeing you today, it seems that you do not live up to your reputation. Song Qingshu did not take it seriously and smiled. Compared to dying in the hands of a stinky man like me, I believe this person would rather die under the slender hands of a fairy. I am a kind-hearted person, so how can I let him die with hatred? You don't have to find a way to flatter me. Where are your eyes looking at? The yellow-robed woman originally had a calm appearance, but she soon found that Song Qingshu's eyes kept looking at her buttocks. Her whole body suddenly exploded. I want to see what a fairy's flattery looks like. It is really different from ordinary flattery. Song Qingshu laughed. The yellow-robed woman's chest violently rose up and down. She did not know why she could not maintain her usual indifferent temperament in front of this man. Every time, she would be half dead because of him. Since someone wants to kill you, it seems that you gain something from going to the Empress? The previous lesson was still fresh in her mind. The yellow-robed woman had also learned to be smart. She simply did not bicker with him, and directly changed the topic. Seeing that she did not respond, Song Qingshu could not help but feel a little bored. But when it came to business, his expression also became serious. It is still too early to say whether I gained anything or not. I still need to return to the Hall of Peaceful Harmony to confirm it. The yellow-robed woman revealed a look of disbelief. You are still thinking about that kind of thing at this time? Song Qingshu was stunned at first, but then he realized that the other party thought that he wanted to find Empress Pei Man to have a deep exchange of the body. He could not help but feel depressed. This woman clearly looked otherworldly, so why was her thought so dirty? Do I look like such a pervert? He was too lazy to explain and simply followed along with her words and said with a smile, It is normal for a man to think about that kind of thing. It would be a problem if he did not think about it. Who told you not to do that kind of thing with me? If you were willing to sacrifice yourself, why would I care about that empress? Shameless, vulgar. The yellow-robed woman's pale face became a little more beautiful, but she was not truly angry. After interacting with Song Qinshu for this period of time, she had more or less grasped his temper. The more he spoke like this, the more it was clear that she had misunderstood. Are you interested in accompanying me to the Hall of Peaceful Harmony? Song Qinshu thought about how the yellow-robed woman had been trying to save her sisters these past few years, so it would be good for her to meet Zhao Huan and Zhao Yuanyuan. Are you not afraid that I will disturb you and the Empress? The yellow-robed woman's lips curved into a faint smile. It's fine. I am a person with a rather special hobby. If a woman is watching from the side, it will actually make me more excited, Song Qinshu replied without changing his expression. Bah! The yellow-robed woman secretly regretted talking to him about this kind of topic. She made up her mind that if it was not necessary, she would not say another word to this scoundrel. Seeing the yellow-robed woman fly in the direction of the Hall of Peaceful Harmony without saying a word, Song Qinshu was also worried that something might happen to the two girls who were left behind. Without wasting any more time, he used his qinggong and chased after her. Inside the Hall of Peaceful Harmony, Empress Pei Man covered her nose with a handkerchief and extinguished the sleeping incense by the bedside. Looking at the two unconscious girls on the bed, her mouth curved into a cold smile. What a pity, these two beauties! She stretched out her hands to grab the two girls' necks and gradually exerted more strength. Although the two girls were unconscious, their faces still showed signs of pain. Just as Empress Pei Man was about to exert more strength, she suddenly felt her wrists go numb and her hands immediately softened. Who is it? Empress Pei Man looked back in shock. Your Highness has forgotten me so quickly? Song Qinshu walked in with a smile on his face. Why is it you? Empress Pei Man subconsciously looked behind him. Where is Luli? So that person is called Luli. Unfortunately, he was caught to death by this fairy. Song Qinshu revealed the figure of the yellow-robed woman behind him. When the yellow-robed woman heard this, she almost couldn't help but slap him. What did he mean by caught to death? That person clearly died under her 9 white bone divine claw. Empress Pei Man's expression finally changed. Looking at the figure of the yellow-robed woman, she suddenly exclaimed, You are the assassin that day. Humph. The yellow-robed woman expressed her tacit agreement. Then who are you? Empress Pei Man didn't shout or anything. After all, she was a person who had seen the world. She knew that for them to appear here silently, they were definitely experts among experts. Facing such experts, as long as she showed any signs of opening her mouth, the other party would be able to instantly suppress her. There was no need to humiliate herself. Song Qinshu took off the mask of Little Xinghua. Finally, I don't have to pretend to be a eunuch. To be honest, this thing isn't that comfortable to wear. Alright, we can get to know each other again. This one's surname is Song Qinshu. Greetings, Your Highness. You are that golden snake trader. Empress Pei Man opened her mouth in surprise. As soon as the words left her mouth, she immediately realized that it was inappropriate. After all, she was currently under the control of the other party. If she angered the other party, it would be troublesome. That's me. Song Qinshu didn't seem to be angry at all. Empress Pei Man finally had a chance to carefully look at the other party. With sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, he was full of heroic spirit. He didn't look like one of those fierce-looking traitors. He looked more like an elegant young master. Suddenly remembering something, Empress Pei Man's heart jumped. That night was you? Song Qinshu secretly glanced at the yellow-robed woman and nodded awkwardly. That night, Your Highness kindly invited me, so this one had no choice but to accept. The yellow-robed woman secretly spat. Adulterous couple. Empress Pei Man suddenly giggled. If I knew it was you, I wouldn't have had to be so worried these days. Your Highness, your current mood doesn't seem right. Shouldn't you show more fear? Song Qingshu calmly looked into her eyes. If I fell into the hands of someone else, I might really be afraid. But falling into the hands of my lover, why should I be afraid? Empress Pei Man's voice was filled with a different meaning. Song Qingshu was speechless for a moment. The yellow-robed woman next to him didn't want to listen to the two of them flirting. She directly walked to the bedside. When she saw the appearance of the two young girls, she couldn't help but exclaim, Yuan Yuan. When she was rescued, these two younger sisters were still in their infancy. However, after entering the Jin Kingdom's palace, she had already visited the laundry yard countless times. Naturally, she recognized the two sisters. That was why when she saw the Prince of Wei's disrespect to them, she attacked him out of anger. The yellow-robed woman checked the pulse of the two and knew that they had only fainted after being drugged. She had just breathed a sigh of relief when she immediately saw the messy marks on their bodies and the two dazzling red flowers on the bedsheet. Her eyes suddenly became cold. She turned her head to stare at Empress Pei Man and asked in a deep voice, "Who did this?" Song Qingshu secretly cursed. Empress Pei Man had already shifted her gaze to him. "Of course it's this romantic and elegant Prince Song." Chapter 8:23. I'll go. Song Qingshu dodged the yellow-robed woman's angry attack. The marble floor where he had been standing was shattered by the finger qi, causing him to be speechless. Seeing that the yellow-robed woman continued to chase him, Song Qingshu hurriedly said, "This is a misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding? You just walked out of this hall. If it wasn't you, then who else could it be?" The yellow-robed woman's face was frosty, and her moves became more and more ruthless. "You are a greedy, lecherous, and dissolute person. I didn't expect that you wouldn't even let such a young girl go." Song Qingshu couldn't help but reply, Hey, don't say that I'm evil. These two girls are indeed a bit lowly, but strictly speaking, they are at the legal age of marriage in this world." "You're still talking." When the woman in yellow heard this, she was even angrier. The 9-yin white bone claw was originally sinister and treacherous, but when she used it, it was overflowing with celestial aura. Even if each move was fatal, it was still extremely pleasing to the eye and the mind. From the corner of his eyes, Song Qingshu noticed that Empress Pei Man was quietly retreating towards the hall. While dodging the yellow-robed woman's attacks, he shot out a wisp of wind from his finger to knock her down. Seizing the opportunity, he said, "Stop fighting, you've really misunderstood." "Misunderstood? Don't tell me that you didn't do this to them." The yellow-robed woman displayed the martial arts of the 9-yin manual to the extreme, alternating the 9-yin white bone claw, heart-destroying palm, and great demon-subduing fist. Combined with the qigong of the manual, the timing of each move was so exquisite that Song Qingshu sighed at his own inferiority. The 9-yin manual could actually be used like this. If he wasn't familiar with the 9-yin manual under this round of attacks like a storm, he would probably have been battered and exhausted. "I did indeed do this to them, but—" Song Qingshu couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "It's good that you admit it." The yellow-clothed woman's sleeve shook, and a flexible ribbon appeared out of nowhere and attacked Song Qingshu from a crafty angle. Song Qingshu's waist was wrapped by the ribbon, but he didn't resist and allowed the other party to pull him over. However, the yellow-robed woman was also very cautious. As he was being pulled over, she flicked her wrist and the ribbon was like an immortal binding rope that wrapped around Song Qingshu tightly. "Why don't you resist?" The yellow-robed woman didn't expect that she would be able to restrain him so easily, so she asked subconsciously. "You're so angry. If I don't let you vent your anger, how can you calm down?" Song Qingshu smiled. The yellow-robed woman held her breath and couldn't help but snort. "I said I'm going to kill you. I'm right here. You can kill me if you want." Song Qinshu straightened his neck and a playful smile hung on his face. But I don't believe you're really willing to kill me. Don't overestimate yourself. The yellow-robed woman's face was expressionless. Under the strength of her 5 fingers, her originally white and translucent fingers seemed to have a layer of sparkling jade-like light. She pressed down on the top of Song Qingshu's head. Even when her fingertips touched Song Qingshu's scalp, he didn't have the slightest intention of resisting. The yellow-robed woman's face was gloomy. She coldly snorted and withdrew her hand. Don't misunderstand. The reason why I'm not killing you is not because I'm unwilling to kill you. It's because I still need you to help me save people. After my pitiful sisters are rescued, I'll slowly settle today's debt with you. I know. Can you put away your rope now? Song Qingshu replied with a grin. Humph. The yellow-robed woman looked away guiltily. She flicked her wrist, and the ribbon that was wrapped around Song Qingshu instantly retracted into her sleeve. Hey, how did you hide this thing? As soon as Song Qingshu was free, he grabbed her hand and looked inside her sleeve. What are you doing? The yellow-robed woman hurriedly shook him off. Her expression was both embarrassed and angry. I'm just curious how you hid such a long ribbon on your body. The scene of Xiao Long Nu's ribbon fluttering in the wind appeared in Song Qingshu's mind again. These days, if one didn't know how to do this kind of thing, it wouldn't be good to call herself a fairy. It's none of your business. The yellow-robed woman's face reddened. She knew that he was being shameless. She ignored him and walked straight to the 2 girls. Looking at their messy clothes, she couldn't help but turn around and glare at Song Qingshu. Only then did she take out a porcelain bottle from her bosom and place it under the 2 girls' noses. In Jianghu, there were all kinds of strange things like knockout drugs and sleeping fumes. Therefore, those who had the means to do so would prepare a bottle of antidote in advance in case of emergency. The antidote was carefully concocted and often carried a pungent smell. Cough, cough, being smelled by the antidote, the 2 girls choked and coughed. Only then did they slowly wake up. The yellow-robed woman hurriedly picked up the clothes that were scattered on the ground and draped them over their bodies, covering their snow-white bodies. Who are you, Yuan? You're awake? The yellow-robed woman thought to herself, although that bastard Song Qingshu is hateful, what's done can't be undone. If Song Qingshu can really save those sisters, I'll be the matchmaker for him. No matter what, I'll make him responsible for my sisters. The 2 girls had just woken up and found that there were a few strangers in the hall. They subconsciously shrank to a corner of the bed. Hearing the yellow-robed woman's gentle tone, they raised their heads and looked at each other. They saw a woman sitting at the head of the bed looking at them with concern. Her incomparably beautiful face made people subconsciously like her. Sister, you are? She's the 19th sister I mentioned to you just now. Song Qingshu introduced. The 2 girls were now in rags. Seeing a strange man so close to them, their reserved nature instantly made them pale. Song Qingshu looked depressed. I say, you're too heartless. It's only been a while, and you already don't recognize me? Zhao Yuan was the more attentive one. She recognized his voice and asked with some uncertainty, Your brother-in-law? Yuan is the most obedient. You recognized me immediately. Song Qingshu's praise made Zhao Yuan blush. But brother-in-law, how did you change your appearance? Zhao Hu stared at him with a puzzled expression. In order to deceive people, I wore a mask. This is my true appearance. Song Qingshu held up the Zioxingguo mask and gestured. The 2 girls looked surprised. Zhao Yuan suddenly added in a low voice, Brother-in-law, you look much better than before. Really? I think so too. Song Qingshu smiled and answered almost shamelessly. The yellow-robed woman next to him was speechless. She thought, these 2 heartless sisters are so intimate with the bastard Song Qingshu, but they don't even pay attention to me, their elder sister. Wait, why do they call Song Qingshu brother-in-law? With a bad guess in her heart, the yellow-robed woman asked with a somewhat unfriendly expression, What do you call this bastard? Brother-in-law? Zhao Hu answered naturally, he's our 19th sister's man. After saying this, the confused girl just reacted, ah, you're our 19th sister? It was the first time to ask for monthly vote. How could she pretend to be very familiar? Chapter 8:24. I am your 19th sister, Ing Luo. Seeing her two younger sisters' innocent looks, the yellow-robed woman smiled. A few days ago, I came to the laundry yard to see you too. 19th sister. The two girls had suffered too much tonight. When they saw each other, they felt a sense of closeness and threw themselves into the yellow-robed woman's embrace, sobbing. Be good, don't cry. In the future, Big Sister will protect you two and not let you two be bullied. The yellow-robed woman gently patted the two girls' backs and comforted them. After a while, the two girls gradually calmed down. The yellow-robed woman suddenly thought of the brother-in-law they spoke of and frowned. Why did you call this bastard brother-in-law? Brother-in-law told us himself. The two girls looked at her blankly. Brother-in-law said that he saved you and you were very grateful to him. Adding on the fact that the two of you had been together for a long time, you ended up repaying him with your body. The yellow-clothed woman's teeth chattered when she heard this. She glared at Song Qinshu fiercely. Song Qinshu quickly waved his hand. This is just a misunderstanding. If I didn't say that, how could I gain their trust so quickly and make them do as I say? The yellow-robed woman's face darkened. So you used brother-in-law's name to cheat them of their innocence. Song Qinshu felt that he was making things worse and could only look at the two girls for help. Yuan, quickly explain to your sister what happened. The two girls stared at him in a daze. Zhao Hu pouted. After all this time, you're not our brother-in-law. You're really bad. Zhao Yuan also agreed. That's right, just now you were talking about keeping the goodies within the family. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have let you. Seeing the yellow-robed woman tremble more and more, as if she could not control her anger at any time, Song Qinshu quickly interrupted them. Stop! Are you trying to kill me by speaking so ambiguously? Don't talk anymore, I'll ask you two questions. You two answer one question. After that, he didn't wait for the two women's reaction and quickly asked the first question. Are you still virgins? Yes, but you. Zhao Yuan blushed and was about to say something when Song Qinshu interrupted her in a hurry. Since that's the case, let's move on. I have a question. Did I teach you to fake the falling red with the blood from your fingers? It's the blood from our fingers, but you were the one who caused it. Thinking of the pain, Zhao Huan looked at him bitterly. Song Qinshu quietly wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Fortunately, he didn't let the two girls explain themselves. If they kept saying things that could easily cause misunderstandings, he wouldn't be able to clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. One last question. Did we purposely leave these marks on you to deceive the Empress? The two girls nodded in unison, but they both blushed as they looked at him. In a small voice, they added, It was also because of you. Who told you to be too weak to leave marks? At the time, the situation was urgent, so I had to do it for you. Song Qinshu felt that he had a clear conscience, so he spoke with confidence. Okay, I understand. The yellow-robed girl looked on coldly from the side. She had pretty much recovered the truth of the matter. She had misunderstood Song Qinshu before, but he wasn't so innocent. At least he had taken advantage of the two sisters. Let's save them first. We'll talk about the rest later. Finishing, he went to pick up the two sisters. Wait. Song Qinshu unconsciously stopped his hand. You're just going to take them away like this. What else? The yellow-robed girl looked at him strangely. Although we can save them like this, we will definitely alert the enemy. At that time, it will be difficult to save the remaining sisters in the laundry yard. Song Qinshu smiled bitterly. What's so difficult about this? The yellow-robed girl pointed at Empress Peiman. As long as we kill this woman, no one will know what our goal is. Also, the death of the Empress is such a big thing. Perhaps it will divert the attention of the gold men, making it convenient for us to go to the laundry yard to save them. This bitch. Empress Pei Man cursed inwardly and said hurriedly, if Ben Gong dies and these two girls disappear, the investigators will definitely start with them. Every woman in the laundry yard will be captured and interrogated. At that time, it will be even more difficult for you to save them. The yellow-robed girl's eyebrows furrowed slightly. She knew that what she said was not without reason. Song Qinshu secretly admired this woman for being able to instantly analyze the relationship between the two. As for the reason that convinced the yellow-robed woman, she was indeed worthy of being the mistress of the harem of a country. She must have gained a lot of experience from all these years of fighting in the palace. But we can't just let you go like this. Song Qinshu smiled. He knew that this woman definitely had a way to save her life. It just depended on whether she was smart or not. It was better for her to suggest it herself than for him to suggest it. We can make a deal. Empress Pei Man's emotions slowly calmed down. There was a trace of calmness in her voice. What kind of deal? Song Qinshu asked without batting an eyelid. From your conversation just now, it should be to save the Song dynasty princesses who are being held captive in the laundry yard. Although your martial arts are high and it's not a problem to save one or two, it's impossible to save all of them. But with Ben Gong's help, it won't be difficult for you to save them, Empress Pei Man said slowly. As expected, the yellow-robed girl was moved. She nodded and said, "Okay, if you help us save them, we can let you go." Empress Pei Man laughed lightly. There was a trace of disdain in her smile. Ben Gong only makes deals with truly intelligent people, such as this Prince Song. The yellow-robed girl's expression did not look good when her intelligence was looked down upon. Song Qinshu hurriedly said, "Of course, what does Empress need us to do? This is how a smart person should talk." Empress Pei Man glanced at the yellow-robed girl. "Originally, killing me would do more harm than good. For the sake of your sisters, the possibility of you choosing to kill me is almost zero. In the end, I help you save people, but I don't get anything in return. This isn't a good deal." "Then what do you want?" the yellow-robed girl asked in annoyance. "Stay in the palace for a while and help me deal with someone." Empress Pei Man ignored her and looked directly at Song Qinshu. "Okay." Song Qinshu's answer was also very straightforward. The yellow-robed girl hurriedly pulled on his sleeve and said quietly, "You don't know anything yet you agree. It's very likely that she will use you as a knife. It's hard to avoid problems." "It's the opposite." Song Qinshu shook his head and looked back at Empress Pei Man. "Only when we are completely bound together will she do her best to help us save people. A deal should be a win-win situation." End of this chapter. Chapter 825. Empress Pei Man giggled. "Little Xing, I've noticed that after you take off your mask, not only do you look better, you also speak more intelligently. Thank you for your praise, Your Highness." Song Qinshu smiled. "Your Highness, please tell me who I'm going to deal with. I see that you've prepared in such a hurry. I'm afraid you don't have much time left." Empress Pei Man's gaze fell on herself. "Release my acupoint first. Is this how you treat your business partner?" "No problem." Song Qinshu was straightforward. With a flick of his finger, he released her acupoint. Empress Pei Man felt her whole body relax. She stood up and stretched, revealing the size of her breasts that made the two young girls envious. Then, she naturally sat down on the couch. "There is not much time left. If I am not wrong, Wei Wang should have entered the palace by now." Wei Wang. A light flashed in Song Qinshu's mind. "You're going to deal with Wei Wang? Who else does young master think I'm going to deal with?" Empress Pei Man looked at him with a faint smile. Song Qinshu's thoughts became clearer. Because she asked him to pretend to be the emperor, he always thought she was going to deal with Jin Shizong. There were too many questions that he couldn't figure out. Now that he knew the target was Wei Wang, everything became clear. Why do you want to deal with Wei Wang? Song Qinshu asked curiously. It's simple. My son died young. Now, he's the only son left. If this little bastard ascends the throne, my fate will be miserable. Empress Pei Man's face flashed with a trace of ruthlessness. She then glanced at the yellow-robed woman. This young lady should know this the best. She saw how Wei Wang treated me when he broke into the Hall of Peace and Harmony. Song Qinshu nodded inwardly. He was there too. Wei Wang hadn't become the emperor yet, but he treated Empress Pei Man like that. If he really became the emperor, Empress Pei Man would definitely suffer. But he's your husband's only son. If something happens to him, won't the throne fall into the hands of the side branch? The yellow-robed girl had received the orthodox royal education of this world. No matter how wrong Wei Wang was, he was still the rightful successor of Shizong's bloodline. Compared to the fall of the imperial family, personal honor and disgrace were nothing. What does that have to do with me? Empress Pei Man sneered. The throne has fallen. It's better in anyone's hands than the Prince of Wei's. The yellow-robed woman had a look of disapproval on her face, but Song Qinshu understood her choice very well. As the saying goes, after I die, I don't care what happens next. Since you said that Wei Wang is almost here, let's cut to the chase. What do you need us to help you with? Song Qinshu asked quickly. My expert Lu Li died in your hands. He was originally used to deal with Wei Wang's hidden guard, so the first thing I want you to do is to help me get rid of that hidden guard. Empress Pei Man knew that time was of the essence. Her expression became serious and she didn't beat around the bush. No problem. Song Qinshu nodded. Then how do you plan to help us save those princesses from the laundry brothel? The more urgent the situation, the easier it was to bargain. Song Qinshu deeply understood this principle. They're all controlled by the laundry brothel with the carefree powder. I can provide you with the antidote for the carefree powder. Empress Pei Man agreed without hesitation. Is there an antidote for that? It can't be the carefree powder itself, right? Song Qinshu asked suspiciously. Of course there's an antidote. Empress Pei Man said quickly. Although the carefree powder itself can also be used as an antidote, it can only be used temporarily. It can't be considered a real antidote. I'll believe you for now. Song Qinshu asked again. Is there anything else you need our help with? Yes. Empress Pei Man pointed at the two girls on the bed. I need their statements. So you're planning to frame Wei Wang? Song Qinshu roughly understood what her plan was. That's not a problem. I can have them cooperate with you. However, I'm very curious. If we didn't appear, how would you have gotten their statements? Sometimes, the debt itself is a kind of statement. Empress Pei Man's face was calm. Song Qinshu raised his eyebrows. This woman was indeed not a normal person. He had to be careful when working with her in the future. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know when he'd be tricked by her. If we can provide statements according to your requirements, then what else can you help us with? Song Qinshu asked again. With the antidote, you can save those people from the laundry brothel. However, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult for you to safely send so many people out of the city. I can give you a gold medal. When the time comes, no one will dare to check you. This chapter is not finished. Please turn to the next page, replied Queen Man. The yellow-robed girl next to her frowned. I don't need your help. I've already bribed a spy. When the time comes, we'll naturally be able to pass through the city gates. Empress Pei Man sneered. The guards at the city gates usually collect money in private and turn a blind eye to the merchants' illegal goods. When the time comes for the laundry brothel to be in trouble, the palace will be furious. The entire city will be under martial law. Who would have the guts to let you out of the city at that time? The yellow-robed girl was stunned. She had to admit that what Empress Pei Man said made sense. The spy she bribed might not be reliable. Song Qingshu agreed with Empress Pei Man's gold medal. Is there anything else you need our help with? I still need you to stay in the palace for a while. In the coming days, I may need your help. Empress Pei Man looked at him quietly. Song Qingshu frowned slightly. Your request is too complicated. What do you plan to use in exchange? He didn't refuse immediately. After all, Wan Yanliang was eyeing the goodbye covetously. Since he had agreed to help Tang Quobian, he had to help him get rid of this hidden danger. Otherwise, if anything happened to the goodbye, he would feel guilty for the rest of his life. Empress Pei Man answered, I can think of a way to divert the troops who will be pursuing them. Otherwise, even if they escape the capital, it will be difficult for them to return to the Song Kingdom safely. Song Qingshu shook his head. This price is not enough. Empress Pei Man smiled and nodded. I also feel that it is not enough. How about this? If you need anything in the future, you can ask me. As long as it is within my capabilities, I will satisfy you. Deal. Song Qingshu asked for more details. In fact, both sides knew that they were both smart people. They knew what they wanted from the other side and wouldn't make things too difficult for the other side. As soon as the transaction was completed, the voice of Prince Wei could be heard from outside the hall. Your son Daoji has come to pay his respects to your highness. Empress Pei Man gave the two a meaningful look. Song Qingshu and the yellow-robed girl nodded slightly. With a light tap of their feet, they flew to the beam. Zhao Huan and Zhao Yuanyuan put on their clothes and returned to their beds. The third chapter, there are 2 more chapters after that. Please give me your monthly tickets. End of this chapter. Chapter 8:26. Empress Pei Man hurriedly tidied up her appearance and said softly, King Wei, please come in. The yellow-robed woman and Song Qingshu hid on the beam together. They were very close to each other and frowned when they saw the situation below. She moved closer to Song Qingshu's ear and whispered, The rules of every country are similar. After dark, no one is allowed to enter or leave the palace without the emperor's permission. It's midnight now, but King Wei, as a prince, has sneaked into the palace. This is a huge taboo. I don't know how that woman tricked him into coming in. The beauty beside him breathed out. Song Qingshu couldn't help but feel relaxed and happy. It's actually very simple. Just use your 2 sisters as bait. The yellow-robed woman frowned and was about to explode when Song Qingshu hurriedly covered her mouth. Don't be agitated. Since we're here, of course we won't let your sisters suffer. The yellow-robed woman blushed and slapped his hand away. She whispered, Am I such a reckless woman in your heart? Song Qingshu chuckled. Of course not. You're a fairy. Stop talking. Look at the situation below. The yellow-robed woman turned her head and added in a small voice, Also, don't get touchy in the future. I'm not as easily bullied as Hu and Yuan. Song Qingshu couldn't help but laugh. He shrugged his shoulders and began to look at the situation below. After King Wei came in, he looked around and saw that only Empress Pei Man was in the hall. His heart skipped a beat. He turned around and said to the air behind him, You can leave too. Your subordinate's duty is to protect your highness. I must stay by your side. An extremely cold voice came from the shadows in the hall. On the beam, Song Qingshu and the yellow-robed woman looked at each other. Although they had seen King Wei's secret guard in action last time, they still felt that he was mysterious and unpredictable. Especially his ability to hide his presence was too heaven-defying. When King Wei came in, he took the opportunity to hide himself. If they hadn't been prepared, it would have been very difficult to find him. The 2 of them didn't dare to speak anymore as they were worried that the person would discover them. Wei Wang did not mind being rejected by his subordinate. He turned around and smiled at Empress Pei Man. This servant of mine is so stubborn. Your Highness, you won't mind, right? This person is loyal to his master, so of course I don't mind. Empress Pei Man's voice was gentle, but she was sneering in her heart. Wei Wang knew that she would not leave, but he still said that to warn her not to play any trick. Your ladyship has invited me so late at night. I wonder what is the matter? Prince Wei found a chair and sat down with a playful look on his face. When the princes came of age, they had to leave the palace to live. Without the emperor's summons, they were not allowed to enter the palace without permission. This was an iron law. However, he was Jin Shizong's only son. Wei Wang believed that if the empress wanted to punish him with this crime, he would only be asking for humiliation. So he knew that the empress might not have good intentions, but he still came. Empress Pei Man leisurely walked in front of Wei Wang and looked at him deeply. Just as Wei Wang was secretly on guard, Empress Pei Man knelt down beside his feet. What are you doing? Wei Wang was shocked. Even though he did not think much of Pei Man, she was still the empress of a country and his elder. It was still very shocking for her to kneel in front of him like this. Not to mention Prince Wei, even Song Qingshu and the yellow-robed girl on the beam were shocked. They knew that Pei Man was clearly plotting against Prince Wei, but she knelt down so readily. They could not help but feel a sense of absurdity and shudder. Your concubine has offended Wei Wang in these years. This is to apologize to Wei Wang. I hope that you will be magnanimous and not hate me in the future, Empress Pei Man said with a weak expression. Empress, what are you doing? I don't understand. Even though Wei Wang looked terrified on the surface, in reality, seeing his sworn enemy kneeling in front of him gave him an unimaginable thrill. However, he was still able to maintain a trace of clarity. He knew that there must be something wrong with this abnormal situation, so he didn't dare to reply rashly. Empress Pei Man sighed faintly. Since it's like this, your concubine will say it directly. I hope your highness doesn't mind. All these years, the emperor's health has been deteriorating day by day. I don't know when he will not be able to hold on. Your highness is the only son of the emperor and is destined to become the emperor in the future. In the past few years, your concubine was ignorant and offended your highness. Now I have completely thought it through. I know that your highness will be my only support in the future, so I plan to resolve the misunderstanding between us as soon as possible. If your highness ascends to the throne in the future, your concubine will not dare to fight with Sister Yuan Fei for the position of Empress Dowager. I only ask that your highness make your concubine an old concubine and bestow 2 eunuchs and palace maids to serve your concubine for the rest of my life. Listening to Pei Man speak slowly, the smile on Wei Wang's face grew wider and wider. Almost every word of the other party struck a chord in his heart. After listening to the end, he finally believed that this woman in front of him had sincerely given in to him. After all, he could not find any reason for her to lie. As he was destined to be the future emperor, any schemes and plots would be destroyed in the face of this iron-like truth. Your Highness, quickly get up. Wei Wang had been educated by the royal family since he was young and still paid attention to his table manners. He couldn't keep Empress Pei Man kneeling like this. He hurriedly reached out to help her up. When he touched her voluptuous body, his heart couldn't help but sway. However, he still knew what was important and knew that he couldn't touch this woman at this time. If he did, after he ascended to the throne, he would be the only man left in the palace and everything would be under his control. In the inner courtyard of the palace, wouldn't he be able to play with this woman however he wanted? If your highness does not forgive your concubine doesn't dare to get up. At such a close distance, Empress Pei Man could faintly see Wei Wang's reaction and her eyes turned cold. Since your highness has thought through the pros and cons, how could this prince be a narrow-minded person? Your highness can be at ease. After this prince ascends to the throne, your highness will definitely be the Empress Dowager. However, your highness will have to be wronged to be the Empress Dowager of the East and West palaces together with this prince's mother. Wei Wang also knew that fighting with Empress Pei Man wouldn't have any good result. If he could obtain her support, everything would become smoother. To be able to stand side by side with little sister Yuan is this concubine's pleasant surprise. How can I feel wronged? Empress Pei Man suddenly revealed a fawning smile. Your concubine knows that your highness took a fancy to the two little palace maids by my side last time, so I specially prepared a gift for you tonight. I hope your highness will kindly accept it. Oh, Wei Wang followed her gaze and noticed the two hazy figures on the phoenix couch. In his mind, he thought of the two beautiful palace maids' delicate faces last time and his heart swayed. Since it's a gift from your highness, this prince won't stand on ceremony. Chapter 4, end of this chapter. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.